Welcome, fellow dreamer. You have found a place of calm and rest. This evening, we're going to explore humanity's ancient longing to soar among the clouds, tracing the gentle arc from Renaissance dreamers, sketching impossible wings to the moment two brothers lifted from the sands of Kitty Hawk and changed our world forever. Accompanied by soothing music and abstract imagery, we'll be uncovering little-known wonders and fascinating stories that gently feed your curiosity as you drift toward sleep. If you enjoy these calm adventures with us, don't be shy. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment to help other smart sleepers dream too. And now, take a deep breath, let your body sink into comfort, and allow your mind to rest and your eyes to close as the tale unfolds before you. The story of human flight begins not with metal and engines, not with wind tunnels and mathematics, but with a simple act that has repeated itself countless times across millennia. A person standing on solid ground, watching a bird glide effortlessly overhead, and feeling something profound stir within. Long before written history, before cities rose and empires fell, our ancestors looked upward. They watched hawks riding invisible currents, eagles spiraling toward mountain peaks, and sparrows darting between trees with impossible agility. And they wondered. This wondering, this deep yearning to join the creatures of the air, appears in the oldest traces of human culture we have discovered, in caves throughout Europe, dating back more than 30,000 years. Ancient artists painted their world on stone walls by flickering firelight. Among the bison and deer, the hunters and handprints, we occasionally find something else: figures with wings, human forms merged with bird shapes, shamans or spirits suspended between earth and sky. These images suggest that even in humanity's earliest days, flight represented something more than mere transportation. It symbolized transformation, transcendence, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. Every ancient civilization that left records behind also left dreams of flight. In Mesopotamia, where writing itself was born, stories emerged of Etana, a shepherd king who flew to heaven on the back of an eagle to obtain the plant of birth. The tale, preserved in cuneiform on clay tablets thousands of years old, describes the earth growing smaller below him, the sea becoming like a garden pond, until finally the land itself disappeared from view. Here was humanity's first written description of what we now call the view from altitude, imagined centuries before anyone could experience it. The ancient Greeks told the story of Daedalus and his son Icarus, perhaps the most enduring flight myth in Western culture. Daedalus, the master craftsman, fashioned wings from feathers and wax to escape imprisonment on the island of Crete. The tale contains both the dream and the warning. Icarus, flying too close to the sun in his exhilaration, melted the wax holding his wings together and fell into the sea. The story reminds us that the ancients understood flight was not just desirable, but dangerous, not just a gift, but a profound challenge to natural order. In ancient China, legends spoke of flying machines and inventors who understood the principles of wind and lift. Stories from various dynasties describe artisans who constructed flying devices, though separating historical fact from mythological embellishment in these accounts remains challenging. What we can say with certainty is that the desire to fly was not limited to Western cultures, but represented a truly universal human aspiration. Hindu mythology presented the Vimanas, flying palaces or chariots of the gods described in ancient Sanskrit texts. These vehicles could travel through the air at great speeds, carrying their divine passengers across vast distances. While clearly legendary, these descriptions show how flight represented ultimate freedom and power in the imagination of ancient India. The Norse peoples imagined Valkyries, supernatural female figures who flew through the air on their missions. Across Africa, numerous cultures developed their own stories of flight, often connected to spiritual transformation or the journey of the soul. Indigenous peoples of the Americas incorporated flight into their mythology through thunderbirds, feathered serpents, and shamanic journeys through the sky world. What united all these diverse stories across continents and centuries was a recognition that flight represented something humanity lacked, but desperately desired. Birds possessed a gift that no amount of human cleverness or strength could replicate through natural means. A bird's hollow bones, its feathers perfectly designed to catch and direct air, its instinctive understanding of wind and current. These were evolutionary adaptations millions of years in the making. Yet despite the impossibility, humans never stopped watching the birds and wondering. Flight appeared in dreams and visions, in religious experiences and artistic expressions. To fly meant to escape earthly limitations, to see the world from a perspective no human eye had ever witnessed, to travel distances in moments that took days or weeks on foot. The symbolic importance of flight shaped religious thought across cultures. Angels in Christian, Jewish, and Islamic traditions possessed wings, marking them as beings who could move between heaven and earth. The ability to fly denoted special status, divine favor, freedom from ordinary physical constraints. To be earthbound was to be merely human. To fly was to approach the realm of the divine. As civilizations developed more sophisticated understanding of the natural world, observers began to study birds more carefully. They noticed how birds spread their wings to catch up drafts, how they angled their feathers to turn, how they tucked their wings to dive and extended them to slow their descent. Long before anyone understood the physics involved, careful watchers recognized that flight was not magic but mechanics, not supernatural but natural, just a form of natural that humans had not yet mastered. This observation marked a crucial shift in human thinking about flight. Instead of viewing it solely as a divine gift or mythological achievement, some began to see it as a problem that might have a solution. If birds flew through physical means rather than magical ones, then perhaps those means could be understood, replicated, or adapted for human use. The dream persisted through the Middle Ages in Europe, a time when much ancient knowledge was preserved and transmitted through manuscripts copied in monasteries. Scholars translated and studied classical texts, including those that touched upon flight, mechanics, and the nature of air itself. The dream lay dormant in some ways, preserved in stories and symbols, waiting for the human understanding of natural philosophy to advance sufficiently. In other parts of the world, practical experimentation with flight-related technology was advancing. In China, kites had been refined to remarkable sophistication, some large enough to lift human observers for military reconnaissance. While not free flight, these tethered ascents represented the first times humans actually rose above the ground through heavier-than-air devices, even if they remained connected to Earth by a string. By the time the Renaissance began to dawn in Europe, the dream of flight had remained constant for thousands of years, while human capability to achieve it had slowly, incrementally grown. Understanding of mechanics, properties of materials, and natural philosophy had advanced. The stage was being set for someone to approach the problem of flight, not as a myth to be retold or a dream to be cherished, but as an engineering challenge to be systematically solved. In the late 15th century, in the workshops and studios of Italy, a mind of extraordinary curiosity and capability would turn its attention to this ancient dream. Leonardo da Vinci would take the first steps toward transforming humanity's oldest wish into a genuine possibility, applying reason and observation to a question that had haunted human imagination since people first gazed upward and envied the birds their impossible freedom. In the flickering candlelight of a Renaissance workshop in Milan, a left-handed man bent over his notebook, writing in mirror script from right to left across the page. The year was sometime in the 1480s, and Leonardo da Vinci was dreaming on paper, while others had dreamed of flight before him. Leonardo would become the first to approach it, not as magic or divine intervention, but as a problem to be solved through careful observation, measurement, and mechanical ingenuity. Leonardo's notebooks reveal a mind that saw no boundary between art and science, between imagination and engineering. When he watched birds wheeling overhead in the Tuscan sky, he didn't simply admire their grace, he studied the angle of their wings, the flex of their feathers, the subtle shifts in their tail positions as they banked and turned. He dissected birds, examining the powerful breast muscles that drove their wings, the hollow bones that reduced their weight, the precise arrangement of primary and secondary feathers. In his famous Codex on the Flight of Birds, compiled around 1505, Leonardo filled page after page with observations. He noted how birds take advantage of wind currents, how they adjust their wing shape for different speeds, how they use their tails as rudders. He understood that birds don't simply flap their wings up and down in a crude pumping motion, but rather create complex figure-eight patterns through the air, generating lift on both the downstroke and the upstroke. From these observations, Leonardo began to sketch machines. His ornithopter designs show human pilots lying prone in wooden frames, their arms and legs connected through an intricate system of pulleys, cables and hinges to massive wings. The wings themselves were to be constructed from wooden ribs covered in starched linen or taffeta, sealed with a mixture that might prevent air from passing through. In Leonardo's vision, the pilot would pump handles and pedals, and this human-powered mechanism would drive the wings in a motion that mimicked bird flight. The drawings are beautiful in their detail. You can see how Leonardo thought through each mechanical connection, how force would transfer from human muscle through rope and lever to wing surface. He sketched the joints that would allow the wings to fold and unfold, the springs that might store energy during part of the wing cycle, the mechanisms that would twist the trailing edge of the wing to provide control. Some of his ornithopters had the pilot standing upright, working pedals like a strange vertical bicycle. Others positioned the aviator horizontally, as if swimming through the air. Leonardo didn't stop with flapping wings. In another remarkable sketch, he drew what he called an aerial screw, a device with a helical surface like a giant spiral staircase. If rotated rapidly enough, he reasoned, this screw would press down on the air and lift itself upward, just as a screw moving through wood lifts itself as it turns. We recognize this now as an early helicopter concept. Though Leonardo lacked any engine that could spin such a device fast enough to generate useful lift, his design called for 4 men to run around a central shaft, but human power could never achieve the necessary rotational speed. Perhaps most practical among Leonardo's aviation sketches was his pyramid-shaped parachute. This design showed a wooden framework covered in linen, forming a tent shape attached to a harness where a person could hang. Leonardo wrote that with such a device, a man could throw himself from any great height without suffering harm. The concept was sound. In fact, in the year 2000, a skydiver named Adrian Nicholas built a parachute exactly following Leonardo's specifications and successfully descended from 10,000 feet, proving that the Renaissance master's design would indeed work, though it was far heavier and less maneuverable than modern parachutes. What Leonardo lacked, of course, was an understanding of the sheer power required for human flight. A human being, even a very strong one, can generate perhaps 1/5 of a horsepower for a brief period. Birds, relative to their body weight, are far more powerful, and their entire anatomy is optimized for flight in ways that human bodies simply are not. Leonardo's ornithopters, beautiful as they were, could never have lifted a person from the ground through muscle power alone. The laws of physics were working against him, though he came remarkably close to understanding why. Yet Leonardo grasped something crucial that would echo down through the centuries. He understood that flight was not supernatural, but mechanical. He recognized that air had substance, that it could be pushed against, that it could support weight if the right surfaces moved through it at the right speeds. He understood that controlling flight required more than just generating lift. A flying machine would need ways to steer, to stabilize, to adjust its attitude in 3 dimensions. In his notes, Leonardo described how a bird in flight must maintain its center of gravity carefully, how it extends or retracts its neck to shift balance, how it uses its tail to prevent pitching forward or backward. These observations anticipated concepts that wouldn't be fully developed until 4 centuries later. He was thinking about longitudinal stability, about pitch control, about the relationship between a craft's center of gravity and its center of pressure. Leonardo never built a full-scale ornithopter, at least not one that history has recorded. Whether he attempted test flights with models or even with human pilots remains a matter of historical speculation. Some scholars believe he may have tested gliding devices, perhaps from the hills around Florence or Milan, but no contemporary accounts survive to confirm such experiments. And Leonardo's own notes shift focus away from aviation in his later years as other fascinations captured his restless intellect. What Leonardo left behind was something more valuable than a working flying machine. He left a methodology. He demonstrated that the path to flight required patient observation of nature, careful documentation, systematic thinking about mechanical principles, and the marriage of artistic vision with engineering practicality. His notebooks, though scattered and unpublished during his lifetime, eventually influenced later generations of inventors who would encounter his drawings and realize that the dream of flight could be approached as a solvable problem rather than an impossible fantasy. As candlelight faded in Leonardo's workshop and he set down his quill, the sketches on his pages waited silently. The ornithopter with its elegant wings would not fly in his lifetime, nor for centuries afterward, but the vision had taken shape, the dream had acquired dimensions, measurements, mechanical connections. Flight had moved from the realm of gods and legends into the world of levers, forces, and calculations. The bridge between dreaming and doing was beginning to form, one careful sketch at a time. Leonardo had filled his notebooks with wings and mechanisms, but between the lines of his sketches lay something more fundamental, something that remained largely invisible to the human eye. To truly conquer the skies, humanity would need to understand the very medium through which birds glided so effortlessly. The air itself held secrets that would take centuries to unravel. For most of human history, air was simply the emptiness between solid things, the nothing that filled the space where something wasn't. People breathed it, felt it as wind against their faces, watched it carry leaves and seeds, yet rarely considered it as a substance in its own right. The ancient Greeks had classified it as one of the four fundamental elements, alongside earth, water, and fire. But what it actually was remained mysterious. How could something invisible have properties? How could nothing have weight? The first glimmers of understanding came not from those dreaming of flight, but from curious minds puzzling over seemingly unrelated questions. In the early 17th century, experimenters began to discover that air wasn't empty at all. It had substance, it had weight, it could push and pull with surprising force. These revelations would eventually prove essential to anyone hoping to build a flying machine, though the connection wasn't immediately obvious. The story of understanding air begins with the simple act of pumping water. Italian miners had long noticed a curious limitation in their pumps. No matter how well constructed, suction pumps could not raise water more than about 33 feet. It was as if some invisible barrier existed at that precise height, a law of nature that refused to be broken. Galileo himself puzzled over this problem late in his life, suggesting that perhaps nature's famous horror of a vacuum had limits after all. His student Evangelista Torricelli approached the mystery differently. In 1643, shortly after Galileo's death, Torricelli conducted an elegant experiment. He filled a glass tube, sealed at one end with mercury, then inverted it into a dish of mercury. The heavy liquid metal didn't drain completely from the tube. Instead, it fell to a certain height and stopped, leaving empty space at the tube's sealed top. Something was holding the mercury column up, keeping it from flowing out. Torricelli reasoned that the weight of the entire atmosphere pressing down on the mercury in the dish was supporting the column inside the tube. Air, he proposed, had weight, and all that air stacked up from the ground to the top of the atmosphere created pressure, an invisible force pushing on everything at the Earth's surface. The space at the top of the tube, he suggested, was truly empty, a vacuum, the absence of air that nature supposedly abhorred. This simple tube of mercury became the first barometer, an instrument for measuring atmospheric pressure. The height of the mercury column rose and fell slightly from day to day, revealing that the pressure of the atmosphere itself changed, like an invisible ocean whose depth varied mysteriously. Here was something you couldn't see, yet it could be measured, quantified, studied with the tools of mathematics and careful observation. The implications rippled outward. If air had weight and created pressure, then it must be made of something, tiny particles perhaps, too small to see, but real nonetheless. A few years later, Blaise Pascal suggested that if atmospheric pressure was caused by the weight of air above, then climbing a mountain should result in lower pressure, since there would be less air above you. His brother-in-law carried a barometer up the Puy de Dôme mountain in France and confirmed exactly that. The higher you climbed, the lower the mercury column fell. The atmosphere thinned with altitude. Around the same time, Otto von Guericke in Germany was demonstrating the power of atmospheric pressure in dramatic fashion. He invented an air pump that could remove air from sealed containers, creating a partial vacuum. In his most famous demonstration in 1654, he fitted two large bronze hemispheres together, pumped the air out from between them, then challenged teams of horses to pull them apart. The atmospheric pressure pushing the hemispheres together was so strong that even 16 horses, 8 on each side, could not separate them. Yet when air was allowed back inside, the hemispheres fell apart easily. The invisible had proven its strength. These discoveries revealed that we live at the bottom of an ocean of air, a fluid that surrounds us with constant pressure from all directions. At sea level, this pressure amounts to nearly 15 pounds pushing on every square inch of surface, though we don't feel it because it pushes equally from all directions, and we've lived within it our entire lives. Our bodies are adapted to this pressure, built to function within it. But air is not just weight and pressure. It has other properties crucial to flight. Air has density, a measure of how much mass occupies a given volume. Unlike water, air is compressible, meaning its density can change. Squeeze air into a smaller space, and it becomes denser. Let it expand, and it becomes thinner. Temperature affects air's density as well. Warm air expands and becomes less dense than cool air, which is why warm air rises. This single fact would make the hot air balloon possible more than a century later. Air also has something called viscosity, though it's much less viscous than water or honey. Viscosity is a kind of internal stickiness, a resistance to flowing and sliding past surfaces. When you move through air, you can feel this resistance as drag. Walk slowly and you barely notice it. Run fast and you feel it pushing against you. The faster something moves through air, the more resistance it encounters. Any flying machine would need to overcome this resistance, this drag that pulls against movement. Understanding that air behaved as a fluid, similar in some ways to water, but different in others, was transformative. Scientists began to realize that objects moving through air would experience forces, pushes, and pulls that depended on their shape, their speed, and the properties of the air itself. A flat plate moving face first through air would experience much more resistance than one slicing edge first. A curved shape might create different patterns of flow than a straight one. By the 18th century, natural philosophers were beginning to investigate how air flowed around objects. Though they lacked the mathematical tools to fully describe what they observed, they could see that moving through air created swirls and eddies, that some shapes seemed to slip through more easily than others. But the underlying principles remained elusive. The mathematics of fluid flow was extraordinarily complex, involving equations that couldn't be solved exactly even once they were properly formulated. Yet piece by piece, the invisible substance that filled the sky was revealing itself to human understanding. Air was real. It had weight and pressure. It could push and pull. It flowed and swirled according to laws that could, with effort and insight, be discovered and described. These weren't just abstract scientific curiosities. They were the foundations upon which flight would eventually be built. Every wing would need to work with and through this invisible ocean. Every flying machine would need to account for air's properties, its density and pressure, its tendency to resist motion, its capacity to support weight if shaped and moved correctly. As the age of enlightenment progressed, the science of air itself matured, setting the stage for the bold experimenters who would soon begin leaping from towers, strapping wings to their arms, and learning through trial and often painful error what worked and what didn't when it came to conquering the invisible ocean above. With the fundamental nature of air now understood as a substance with weight and pressure, a substance that could be pushed against and manipulated, the stage was set for humanity's first deliberate attempts to leave the ground. What followed was a period of remarkable courage, boundless optimism, and often painful lessons about what would not work. These were the tower jumpers, the wing-strapped dreamers, who looked at birds and thought the solution might be simple enough to grasp with their own two hands. The 16th century brought forth men who believed that flight was primarily a matter of courage, and the Wright apparatus. If birds could fly with wings, surely humans needed only to construct similar appendages and leap boldly into the air. The logic seemed sound to minds not yet equipped with the mathematics of weight ratios and power requirements. In the year 1503, an Italian man named Giovanni Battista Danti reportedly constructed wings and attempted to fly across Lake Trasimeno during a wedding celebration. According to the accounts that have survived, he managed to glide some distance before crashing onto a rooftop, breaking his leg in the process. Whether the story has been embellished over the centuries remains uncertain, but it represents the beginning of a long tradition of brave, if misguided, attempts. These early experimenters worked from observation rather than calculation. They watched birds with intense focus, noting how wings beat and how feathers splayed during different maneuvers. What they could not know was that bird flight depends on an extraordinary power-to-weight ratio that human muscle simply cannot achieve. A sparrow's flight muscles comprise nearly a third of its total body weight, designed through millions of years of evolution for the singular purpose of generating lift. A human attempting to fly by flapping artificial wings faces an impossible mathematical barrier that no amount of courage can overcome. Yet the attempts continued, each one adding a small piece to the growing understanding of what flight truly required. In 1507, a Scottish alchemist named John Damien constructed wings made of chicken feathers and leapt from the walls of Stirling Castle in Scotland. He survived the fall, landing in a dunghill that likely saved his life, though he broke his thigh bone. His explanation for the failure was that he had used chicken feathers rather than eagle feathers, and chickens, as he noted, were naturally inclined toward dung heaps rather than soaring. The reasoning was flawed, but the observation that different birds had different flight capabilities showed a glimmer of analytical thinking. The 17th century brought more attempts, each varying slightly in design, but sharing the fundamental misunderstanding that human-powered ornithopters could work. Towers, castle walls, and cathedral spires served as launching points for these early aviators who were part inventor, part showman, and entirely brave. The Turkish inventor Hezarfen Ahmed Çelebi supposedly flew across the Bosphorus Strait in 1632 using wings attached to his arms, gliding from the Galata Tower to the district of Üsküdar. If the account is accurate, the distance would have been impressive, suggesting he achieved a genuine glide rather than mere flapping. The wind patterns over the water and the height of his starting point may have given him enough of an advantage to cover substantial distance before gravity inevitably won. These experiments taught an important lesson, though it was one that took many decades to fully appreciate. Falling with style, as it were, was more achievable than true flapping flight. When the tower jumpers leaped with rigid wings held outstretched rather than attempting to beat them up and down, they occasionally achieved brief glides. The problem was that without any understanding of control surfaces or weight distribution, these glides ended in crashes more often than gentle landings. The human body is not naturally aerodynamic, and the early wing designs attached to arms or strapped to backs created unstable configurations that would tumble or flip as soon as they caught the wind. By the 18th century, some experimenters began to recognize the futility of muscle-powered flapping and turned their attention to gliding with fixed wings. In 1742, the Marquis de Buckville attempted to fly across the Seine River in Paris. Using wings attached to his arms and legs, he launched himself from his riverside house, apparently achieved some forward motion, but fell onto a washerwoman's boat moored below, breaking his leg. The pattern of broken legs among early aviation pioneers is notable, perhaps because the human instinct when falling is to land on one's feet, concentrating the force of impact on the lower limbs. What strikes us now, looking back across the centuries, is the persistence of these individuals. Each crash, each broken bone, each public humiliation might have ended the dream entirely, yet new experimenters continued to appear, each convinced they had solved the puzzle that had defeated their predecessors. This persistence, however misguided the specific attempts might have been, represented something essential to human progress: the willingness to fail, to test ideas against reality, rather than simply theorizing, moved the science forward, even when individual experiments ended in disaster. The tower jumping era gradually faded as understanding of flight mechanics improved, but not before establishing several important principles through negative example. First, human muscle power alone could not sustain flight through flapping. Second, jumping from height could produce brief glides, suggesting that unpowered flight might be possible with the right design. Third, control was just as important as lift, a lesson written in the tumbles and crashes of uncontrollable wing contraptions. And fourth, perhaps most importantly, experimentation required courage, but also demanded systematic analysis, rather than blind imitation of birds. As the 18th century progressed and gave way to the 19th, the focus would shift dramatically. Rather than strapping wings to human arms and leaping hopefully into the void, inventors would begin to think about entirely different approaches to leaving the ground. The age of lighter-than-air flight was approaching, bringing with it the first genuine success in human aviation. But those tower jumpers, those brave souls who leaped and fell and sometimes glided briefly before crashing, had played their part in the long story. They had demonstrated conclusively what would not work, and in doing so, they had cleared the path for approaches that might. The broken legs and bruised bodies of the tower jumping era were not in vain. Every failure taught observers something about air, weight, and the unforgiving nature of gravity. These lessons would inform the work of more systematic experimenters who were beginning to apply scientific method to the problem of flight, measuring and calculating, rather than simply leaping and hoping. After centuries of watching brave souls leap from towers with little more than hope and fabric wings, humanity's relationship with the sky was about to change in an unexpected way. The answer would not come from imitating the flapping of birds or the leap of faith from high places. Instead, it would arrive through an altogether different understanding, one that asked a simpler question. What if we didn't try to be like birds at all? What if we simply found a way to be lighter than the air itself? In the French countryside during the early 1780s, two brothers who made their living manufacturing paper had become fascinated by a curious phenomenon. Joseph Michel and Jacques-Étienne Montgolfier watched smoke rising from fires and noticed how it carried embers upward into the darkness. They observed fabric drying over hearths, billowing and straining upward as if pulled by invisible hands. Something in the heated air, they reasoned, had the power to lift. The Montgolfier brothers began their experiments quietly, filling small bags with smoke from burning paper and wool. These modest bags rose to the ceiling of their rooms, bobbing gently against the plaster like living things seeking escape. Encouraged, they built larger versions, moving their experiments outdoors where there were no ceilings to limit their ambitions. Their neighbors in Annonay must have wondered at the sight of these paper merchants filling enormous sacks with smoke, watching them tug at their tethers with increasing force. By the spring of 1783, the brothers felt ready for a public demonstration. On a June day in the town square of Annonay, they prepared a spherical envelope made of linen and paper, nearly 35 feet in diameter. A fire of straw and wool burned beneath the opening, filling the great sphere with hot, rising smoke. The assembled crowd watched as the fabric grew taut, the balloon swelling with purpose. Then, when the brothers released it, the sphere climbed into the sky, rising nearly 6,000 feet before the air inside cooled, and it drifted back to Earth some distance away. Word of this achievement traveled swiftly to Paris, where the scientific community received the news with a mixture of excitement and skepticism. King Louis XVI himself took interest in these claims that men from the provinces had conquered the air with nothing more than smoke and fabric. The brothers were summoned to demonstrate their invention at the royal court at Versailles. For this demonstration in September of 1783, the Montgolfiers prepared an even more ambitious display. They would send not just an empty balloon skyward, but living passengers. A sheep named Monteciel, meaning climb to the sky, would be accompanied by a duck and a rooster in a wicker basket suspended beneath the balloon. Before the king, queen, and an enormous crowd, the balloon was inflated with hot air from burning straw. The great decorated sphere, painted in royal blue and adorned with golden flourishes, strained upward as the fire heated the air within. When released, the balloon rose magnificently, carrying its bewildered animal passengers into the sky. For 8 minutes, the creatures soared above Versailles, traveling nearly 2 miles before the balloon descended safely in a forest clearing. The sheep, duck, and rooster emerged unharmed, proving that living beings could survive in the upper air. The duck, already accustomed to heights through flight, seemed least impressed by the journey. Meanwhile, in Paris, a scientist named Jacques Charles had been following the Montgolfiers' work with great interest, though he approached the problem from a different direction entirely. Charles understood that the hot air used by the Montgolfiers would eventually cool, limiting flight duration. He knew of recent experiments with a newly isolated gas that was much lighter than air at any temperature: hydrogen. Working with the craftsman brothers Anne-Jean and Nicolas Louis Robert, Charles set about constructing a balloon that would float not on heated air, but on hydrogen gas itself. Creating such a balloon presented new challenges. Hydrogen would leak through ordinary fabric, so Charles used silk coated with a rubber solution to make it airtight. Generating enough hydrogen required large quantities of sulfuric acid and iron filings, a dangerous and expensive process. But by late August of 1783, Charles had his hydrogen balloon ready. Launched from Paris, it rose over 3,000 feet and traveled 15 miles before landing in a village, where frightened peasants, seeing this strange sphere fall from the sky, reportedly attacked it with pitchforks. The race was now on to achieve manned flight. On November 21, 1783, 2 men named Jean-François Pilatre de Rosier and François Laurent d'Alande climbed into a wicker gallery suspended beneath a Montgolfier hot air balloon in Paris. As the fire heated the air within the great envelope, the balloon lifted gently from the ground. For the first time in human history, people were flying, truly flying, not falling with style or gliding briefly downward, but rising up through the air with control over their ascent. For 25 minutes, Pilatre de Rosier and d'Arlande drifted over Paris, feeding the fire with straw to maintain their altitude, floating above the rooftops and spires of the city. The Seine River passed beneath them like a silver ribbon. People in the streets below appeared as small as insects, going about their business, most unaware that overhead, humanity had finally slipped the bonds that had held it to Earth since the beginning of time. The balloon traveled over 5 miles before the aeronauts allowed it to descend, landing safely beyond the city walls. 10 days later, Jacques Charles and Nicolas Louis Robert made the first manned flight in a hydrogen balloon. Launching from the Tuileries garden before an enormous crowd, they rose smoothly into the December sky. Without the need to tend a fire, their flight was more serene than the hot air balloon journeys. They sailed over the countryside for 2 hours, traveling 27 miles and reaching an altitude of nearly 2,000 feet. After landing, Charles convinced Robert to exit, then took off again alone, rising so high so quickly that he experienced ear pain from the pressure change. In that moment, Charles became the first human to fly solo. The world had witnessed something profound in those final months of 1783. The sky, which had been the realm only of birds and imagination, had opened to human presence. People could now rise above the landscape that had always bound them, seeing their world from a perspective previously reserved for the divine. Church steeples that reached toward heaven were now below eye level. Mountain peaks could be approached from above. The horizon had expanded in ways that changed not just how far people could see, but how they understood their place in the world. Yet even in this triumph, the limitations were evident. Balloons went where the wind took them, drifting as passengers rather than pilots. They could rise and descend, but horizontal direction remained at the mercy of air currents. A balloon could not fly into the wind, could not choose its destination with certainty. Still, after millennia of dreaming, humanity had finally left the ground on purpose and returned safely. The age of aviation had begun, even if the age of controlled flight still lay ahead, waiting for others to unlock its secrets. The success of those first balloon flights in 1783 had opened a door that could never be closed. News of the Montgolfier brothers' achievements spread across Europe with remarkable speed, carried by letters, newspapers, and the excited conversations of those who had witnessed something truly miraculous. Within months, the fever for flight had taken hold of the continent's imagination, and balloonists began to emerge in cities far from Paris, each eager to experience the wonder of rising above the earth. The technology itself was relatively simple to replicate, which accelerated its spread. A large envelope of fabric, some rope, a basket, and either a fire or hydrogen gas were all that stood between an ambitious experimenter and the sky. Unlike the complex mechanical challenges that would later face airplane designers, ballooning required more courage than technical sophistication. This accessibility meant that by 1784, balloons were ascending over multiple countries, each flight adding to humanity's growing understanding of the upper atmosphere. Jean-Pierre Blanchard became one of the most prolific aeronauts of this early period, making his first ascent in Paris in 1784. Unlike some balloon enthusiasts, who were content with simple vertical journeys, Blanchard harbored grander ambitions. He envisioned crossing the English Channel, that formidable body of water that had separated Britain from the European continent since the last ice age. The idea captured public imagination on both sides of the water, though many considered it foolhardy at best and suicidal at worst. On January 7, 1785, Blanchard and his passenger, an American physician named John Jeffreys, lifted off from the Dover cliffs on the English side. Their hydrogen balloon carried them into a cold winter sky, and for a time, all seemed well. But crossing the channel meant traveling not just horizontally, but maintaining enough altitude to avoid ditching into the frigid waters below. As they progressed, the balloon began to lose height in a way that must have sent chills through both men that had nothing to do with the temperature. To maintain altitude, they began throwing everything overboard that wasn't absolutely essential. First went their ballast sand, then their food supplies, then much of their equipment. As the French coast drew nearer but the balloon continued to sink, they removed their outer clothing and tossed it into the sea below. The image of two men in their shirt sleeves, shivering in a wicker basket as they drifted over grey winter waters, speaks to both the desperation and determination of these early aeronauts. They cleared the French coastline with barely any altitude to spare, landing in a forest near Calais. They had crossed the channel by air, a journey of roughly 21 miles that had seemed impossible to previous generations. News of this crossing electrified both scientific circles and the general public. If balloons could cross the channel, what other barriers might they overcome? The answer came in various forms as ballooning spread to new territories. In America, Blanchard himself made the first balloon ascent in 1793, launching from Philadelphia before a crowd that reportedly included President George Washington. The flight lasted 46 minutes and covered about 15 miles, proving that the new nation's skies were just as navigable as Europe's. These early balloon flights served multiple purposes beyond simple spectacle, though spectacle they certainly provided. Scientists recognized that balloons offered an unprecedented opportunity to study the atmosphere at different altitudes. Weather patterns, air pressure, temperature variations, and the composition of air itself could all be investigated from a balloon's basket. Instruments were carried aloft, measurements recorded, and gradually a picture emerged of the invisible ocean of air in which humanity had always lived but never truly explored. The military potential of balloons became apparent almost immediately. The ability to rise above a battlefield and observe enemy positions offered an enormous tactical advantage. During the French Revolutionary Wars, the French military established a balloon corps, using tethered observation balloons at the Battle of Fleurus in 1794. From their elevated vantage point, observers could see troop movements and artillery positions that would have been invisible from ground level, then communicate their findings to commanders below. It was a new dimension of warfare, though one that would take more than a century to fully develop. Despite these practical applications, ballooning in the early 19th century remained primarily an entertainment and a curiosity. Balloon ascensions became popular public events, with crowds gathering to watch as aeronauts prepared their craft and then slowly, majestically rose into the sky. The sight never lost its power to inspire wonder, this gentle defiance of gravity that let humans float among the clouds like dandelion seeds on a summer breeze. Women aeronauts emerged during this period as well, challenging the era's conventional boundaries. Sophie Blanchard, wife of Jean-Pierre, became a celebrated balloonist in her own right, making numerous ascents across Europe. She specialized in night flights, launching fireworks from her balloon to the delight of crowds below, the sparks falling through darkness like reversed stars. Her career demonstrated that the sky recognized no gender restrictions, though society on the ground remained less enlightened. Yet even as ballooning flourished and spread, its fundamental limitations became increasingly apparent to those who thought seriously about flight. A balloon went where the wind took it, with little control over direction or destination. Aeronauts could ascend by adding heat or releasing gas, and descend by cooling or venting, but horizontal movement remained at the mercy of air currents. This made balloons useful for observation, scientific study, and demonstration, but impractical for reliable transportation. You might leave from London hoping to reach Edinburgh, only to find yourself drifting over the North Sea toward Norway instead. The late 18th and early 19th centuries thus represented a paradoxical moment in aviation history. Humans had finally achieved the ancient dream of flight, rising hundreds and sometimes thousands of feet into the air, traveling dozens of miles, seeing their world from entirely new perspectives. And yet they remained passengers rather than pilots, carried by forces they could only partially control. The balloon had conquered the vertical dimension, but left the horizontal, largely to chance. This limitation meant that even as ballooning continued to develop and spread, forward-thinking individuals began to consider other approaches. If lighter-than-air flight could not provide true control and reliable transportation, perhaps heavier-than-air flight might prove more promising. The stage was being set for new questions about how objects moved through air, questions that would require understanding forces that, while invisible, were just as real and measurable as the buoyancy that lifted balloons skyward. As balloons drifted across borders and continents, carrying brave aeronauts into the atmosphere, a deeper question began to occupy the minds of curious scientists and engineers. Why did things fly at all? What invisible forces held a balloon aloft? And more intriguingly, what forces might someday hold a heavier-than-air machine in the sky? The 19th century was becoming an age of measurement and mathematics, and the mysterious realm of the air was finally ready to yield its secrets. For millennia, humans had watched birds soar effortlessly on outstretched wings, but watching and understanding were separated by a vast gulf. The air itself seemed like nothing at all, an absence rather than a presence. Yet this apparent emptiness could hold a balloon steady, could resist a hand waved through it, could push against a sail with tremendous force. The scientists of the 1800s began to realize that air was very much something, a fluid with its own properties and behaviors, following laws as precise as those governing water or stone. The first concept to grasp was lift, that upward force that opposes gravity and allows an object to rise or remain suspended. Balloons achieved lift through buoyancy, floating on air just as a cork floats on water. But this seemed an unlikely path for practical flight. A balloon went wherever the wind desired, drifting with the currents like a leaf on a stream. True flight, the kind that birds demonstrated every day, required lift generated by motion through the air itself, by the interaction between a moving surface and the surrounding atmosphere. Understanding this interaction meant understanding how air behaved when something moved through it. When a flat surface moves through still air, the air must flow around it, parting before it and closing behind it. This movement creates pressure, the force of air molecules pressing against any surface they encounter. A hand extended from a carriage window feels this pressure as wind, stronger the faster the carriage moves. But air pressure does not act equally in all directions when something is moving through it. Scientists began to realize that a curved surface, positioned at a certain angle to the oncoming air, could generate different pressures above and below. The air flowing over the top of such a surface might move faster than the air flowing beneath it. This difference in speed, though the precise mechanism would be debated for decades to come, created a difference in pressure. Where the air moved faster, the pressure dropped. Where it moved more slowly, the pressure remained higher. This pressure difference, acting across the entire surface area of a wing or airfoil, could create a substantial upward force. This was lift in its most fundamental form. But lift never acts alone. The moment something moves through air, it encounters resistance, a force pushing back against its motion. This resistance, this retarding force, became known as drag. Every object moving through the atmosphere creates drag. From a falling leaf to a galloping horse, the air must be pushed aside, must flow around the moving object, and this requires energy. The faster something moves, the greater the drag it encounters, increasing not just proportionally, but dramatically with speed. Drag takes many forms. There is the direct pressure of air building up against the front of a moving object, the frontal resistance that any solid surface presents to the atmosphere. There is the friction of air molecules sliding against a surface, tiny interactions that add up across large areas. There is the tumbling, chaotic wake that forms behind objects, where the smooth flow of air breaks down into swirling eddies and vortices that pull backward on anything moving through them. Early experimenters found that shape mattered enormously. A streamlined form, rounded at the front and tapering gradually at the rear, could slip through air with far less drag than a flat plate or blunt object of the same size. These two forces, lift and drag, became the central puzzle of flight. To fly, an object needed to generate enough lift to overcome its weight, the downward pull of gravity, but generating lift required movement through the air, and movement created drag that resisted forward motion. Something else was needed, a force to push the flying object forward through the air, to overcome drag and maintain the speed necessary for lift. This forward force became known as thrust. Weight, thrust, lift, and drag. These four forces became the fundamental elements of flight, the invisible players in an eternal balancing act. For an object to fly straight and level, lift must equal weight, and thrust must equal drag. To climb, lift must exceed weight. To accelerate, thrust must exceed drag. Every bird in the sky, every balloon in the wind, every future airplane yet to be built would be governed by these relationships. The mathematics of these forces occupied some of the finest scientific minds of the 19th century. In England, in France, in Germany, researchers built apparatus to measure air resistance, to test different shapes and angles, to quantify what had previously been only intuition and guesswork. They discovered that doubling the speed through air did not merely double the forces involved, it quadrupled them. They found that the angle at which a surface met the oncoming air, the angle of attack, determined how much lift and drag that surface would generate. Too shallow an angle produced little lift, too steep an angle caused the smooth airflow to break away from the surface entirely, a phenomenon that would later be called a stall. Wind tunnels began to appear in laboratories, chambers where air could be blown past stationary models, allowing precise measurements impossible with objects actually moving through still air. Springs and balances captured the tiny forces acting on small surfaces, translating invisible air pressures into visible deflections and numbers that could be recorded and compared. The science of aerodynamics was being born, though that very word would not enter common usage until decades later. What emerged from these patient investigations was a picture of flight as a delicate negotiation between competing demands. The shape that generated the most lift was rarely the shape that created the least drag. The angle that worked best at one speed might be disastrous at another. Materials needed to be strong enough to withstand the forces involved, but light enough not to require impossible amounts of lift to support. Every choice involved compromise, every design a balance between conflicting requirements. As the 19th century progressed past its midpoint, the accumulated knowledge about lift and drag, about air pressure and airflow, began to reach a critical threshold. The dreamers and tower jumpers of earlier centuries had lacked this understanding, had operated on hope and intuition alone. But now, the fundamental forces were known, even if imperfectly. The question was no longer whether heavier-than-air flight was possible in principle. The question was becoming how to achieve it in practice, how to arrange the forces, how to generate enough lift without creating unmanageable drag, how to provide sufficient thrust without adding unbearable weight. The answers to these questions were taking shape in the minds of inventors who combined the patient methodology of science with the daring vision of pioneers. Among them was an English gentleman, whose careful observations would transform aviation from dream to engineering discipline. As the 19th century opened, the pieces of the flight puzzle lay scattered across Europe and America, like fragments of a dream waiting to be assembled. The forces acting on flying objects remained mysterious to most, understood in pieces but not as a complete system. Then, in the green countryside of Yorkshire, England, a man of keen observation and scientific temperament began to see what others had missed. Sir George Cayley was born into a world still dominated by horse-drawn carriages and sailing ships, yet his mind soared far beyond these earthbound limitations. In the opening years of the 1800s, while Napoleon marched across Europe and the Industrial Revolution reshaped society, Cayley turned his attention skyward with a clarity of thought that would transform humanity's approach to flight forever. What made Cayley different from those who came before was his willingness to abandon cherished assumptions. For centuries, inventors had pursued ornithopters, those wing-flapping machines inspired by birds. Leonardo himself had filled pages with such designs. But Cayley recognized a fundamental truth that seemed almost radical in its simplicity. The act of generating lift did not need to be the same as the act of moving forward. Birds combined these functions in their flapping wings, but a human flying machine need not imitate them so literally. In 1804, Cayley engraved a small silver disc that would become one of the most important artifacts in aviation history. On one side, he sketched a fixed-wing aircraft with separate systems for lift and propulsion. On the other, he diagrammed the forces acting upon it. This tiny medallion, no larger than a coin you might carry in your pocket, represented a revolution in thinking. Cayley had separated the problem of flight into its component parts, identifying 4 distinct forces: lift pushing upward, weight pulling downward, thrust moving forward, and drag resisting that forward motion. Understanding these forces as separate entities that could be balanced against one another opened entirely new possibilities. A wing need not flap. It could remain fixed and generate lift simply by moving through the air at the proper angle. An engine or propeller could provide thrust independently. Control surfaces could manage direction. Each problem could be solved on its own terms, then integrated into a complete system. Cayley's genius extended beyond theory into practical experimentation. He built model gliders and tested them, carefully observing how different wing shapes and tail configurations affected their flight. In 1809, he published a remarkable 3-part treatise titled On Aerial Navigation that laid out his findings with scientific precision. He described the cambered or curved airfoil shape that would prove more efficient than flat surfaces. He discussed the importance of the center of gravity and how it related to stability. He even anticipated the need for lightweight engines, though the technology of his era could not yet provide them. His workshops at Brompton Hall became laboratories of the future, where models glided across rooms and strange contraptions took shape under his direction. Cayley understood that air itself had substance, that it could push and resist, that its properties could be measured and predicted. He calculated wing areas needed to support various weights, experimented with different materials to reduce overall mass, and considered every aspect of the flying machine as an engineering problem to be methodically solved. The most dramatic demonstration of Cayley's principles came in 1853, when he was already 80 years old. After decades of experimentation with models and designs, he constructed a full-sized glider capable of carrying a human being. The details of what happened next have been passed down through family history, gaining the soft edges of legend while retaining their essential truth. A coachman, whose name has been lost to time, was persuaded or perhaps instructed to climb aboard. The glider was launched from a hillside on Cayley's estate, and for a brief, glorious moment, it flew. The distance covered was modest, perhaps only a few dozen yards across Brompton Dale. The flight lasted mere seconds, yet in those seconds, something profound occurred. A human being had flown in a heavier-than-air machine with fixed wings, controlled and designed according to scientific principles. This was not a balloon drifting on the whims of wind, not a desperate tower jumper hoping feathers would save him, but engineered flight based on understanding the forces at work. The coachman, upon landing safely but shakily, is said to have resigned from Cayley's service with the memorable statement that he was hired to drive, not to fly. One can hardly blame him. He had just experienced something no human in history had done before, and the terror of it must have eclipsed any sense of accomplishment. Cayley's work did not bring him fame in his lifetime. His publications reached relatively few readers, and the practical demonstration at Brompton Dale remained little known outside his immediate circle. He died in 1857, 4 years after that historic glider flight, having planted seeds that would take decades to fully germinate. The world was not quite ready for his insights, still distracted by the spectacle of ballooning and uncertain about the possibility of heavier-than-air flight. Yet his legacy quietly spread through the small community of those obsessed with conquering the air. His writings were read and absorbed by the next generation of experimenters. His separation of lift from propulsion became the foundation upon which all future aircraft would be built. His identification of the four forces gave inventors a framework for understanding their successes and failures. Every airplane that has flown since that day in 1853, from the Wright Flyer to modern jetliners, embodies Cayley's fundamental insights about the nature of flight. As night settles over the Yorkshire countryside where Cayley once worked, we can imagine the quiet satisfaction he might have felt, knowing he had glimpsed the future. The age of gliding experiments was about to dawn, and brave pilots would soon take to the skies in craft built on principles he had discovered. The dream of flight, so long the province of mythology and fantasy, had become a scientific problem with scientific solutions. The path forward was clear, even if the journey would demand courage and sacrifice from those who followed it. With Sir George Cayley's fundamental insights now established and his glider having carried a human being through the air, the stage was set for a new generation of experimenters to take flight more seriously. The middle decades of the 19th century saw a gradual but remarkable shift in how people approached the problem of aviation. No longer was it enough to simply throw oneself from a tower with homemade wings and hope for the best. Instead, a more methodical approach began to emerge, one that recognized the value of learning to glide before attempting to add power to the equation. The winds of France carried one of the earliest and most determined of these gliding pioneers into the air. Jean-Marie Le Bris, a sea captain from Brittany, had spent countless hours observing the albatrosses that followed his ship across the ocean waves. These magnificent birds, with their enormous wingspans and effortless soaring ability, captivated him completely. He watched how they could hang almost motionless in the wind, making only the slightest adjustments to their wing angles, and he began to wonder if a machine designed along similar principles might carry a human being just as gracefully. In 1856, Le Bris constructed what he called his artificial albatross, a glider with a wingspan of over 40 feet. The wings could be adjusted in flight, and the whole apparatus was mounted on a wheeled cart. His approach to testing was as creative as his design. He had the cart pulled by a horse along a beach near his home, facing into the wind. As the cart picked up speed and the wind filled the wings, Le Bris rose into the air, lifting both himself and the cart beneath him off the ground. The flight covered perhaps 300 feet, a brief but genuine moment of controlled gliding that proved the principles he had observed in nature could indeed be transferred to human-built wings. Le Bris made several flights over the following years, though not all ended well. A crash in 1858 broke his leg and ended his most active period of experimentation. Though his enthusiasm never entirely faded, what matters most about Le Bris is not the distance he traveled, but the approach he demonstrated. Here was a man who studied natural flight carefully, built a machine based on those observations, and actually tested his ideas in the air. He contributed valuable practical knowledge to the slowly growing body of aviation experience. Across Europe, others were beginning to pursue similar paths. The notion of gliding, of learning to manage an aircraft in the air without the complication of an engine, was taking root in the minds of serious experimenters. They recognized something crucial. Before you could hope to fly with power, you needed to understand how to control an aircraft that was already in the air. The glider became the essential training ground, the classroom where the fundamental lessons of flight could be learned without the added weight, expense, and danger of an engine. Francis Herbert Wenham in England made significant contributions during the 1860s and 1870s, not so much through his own flights, but through his careful study of wing shapes and his construction of one of the first wind tunnels in 1871. This device, built for the Aeronautical Society of Great Britain, allowed experimenters to test different wing designs in controlled conditions rather than risking their lives on every new idea. The wind tunnel represented a crucial step toward making aviation a true science rather than merely a courageous art. The 1880s and 1890s saw the gliding movement reach its full flowering, particularly through the work of several dedicated experimenters who made hundreds or even thousands of flights. These men were no longer merely hoping to survive a single leap into the air. They were systematically exploring how aircraft behaved, how weight shifted, how turning could be accomplished, how the wind affected stability. They were learning the grammar of flight, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph. In Russia, Alexander Mojsky built and tested gliders before attempting powered flight, though his steam-powered aircraft of 1884 achieved little more than a brief hop. In France, the wealthy engineer Clément Ader constructed bat-winged aircraft and claimed various successes, though the details of his experiments remain somewhat uncertain. What is clear is that throughout Europe, a network of experimenters was emerging, people who corresponded with one another, read each other's papers, and built upon each other's successes and failures. The gliding experiments of this era shared certain common characteristics. Most featured fabric-covered wings stretched over wooden frames. Most placed the pilot in a horizontal position, often hanging beneath the wings like Cayley's coachman. Most relied on the pilot shifting his body weight to maintain balance, a technique that worked reasonably well in calm conditions, but became desperately difficult when the wind picked up or when making turns. Control remained the great unsolved problem. An aircraft could be built that would glide reasonably well in a straight line, but what happened when you needed to turn? What happened when a gust of wind tipped one wing down? How could a pilot respond quickly enough to prevent a gentle glide from becoming a fatal tumble? These questions haunted every experimenter, and more than a few paid with their lives for inadequate answers. Yet the knowledge accumulated, thousands of glides, some lasting only seconds, others extending for impressive distances, gradually revealed the patterns and principles of heavier-than-air flight. Wing shapes that worked well became distinguished from those that did not. The importance of the aircraft's center of gravity became clear. The relationship between speed and lift, between angle and stall, between weight and glide ratio. All these relationships began to be understood, not just theoretically but practically, through direct experience in the air. The gliding pioneers of the late 19th century were building something more valuable than any single aircraft. They were building a foundation of practical knowledge, a collection of hard-won lessons about what the air demands of anything that wishes to move through it with grace and control. They were proving that sustained, repeated flight was possible for those patient enough to learn its requirements. And they were inspiring others, showing that the dream of flight was not mere fantasy, but an achievable goal for those willing to approach it with discipline, courage, and scientific rigor. As the 1890s progressed, one figure would emerge who would bring all these threads together, who would fly more often and document more carefully than anyone before him, and whose work would directly inspire the men who would finally solve the problem of powered, controlled flight. The age of gliding was reaching its culmination, and the lessons learned in these brave experiments would soon bear fruit beyond anything these pioneers might have imagined. The gliders had taught their lessons well by the 1890s. Those graceful craft of wood and fabric that sailed down hillsides and launched from carefully chosen slopes. But among all the dedicated experimenters who threw themselves into the wind, one man would come to symbolize both the promise and the peril of early flight. His name was Otto Lilienthal, and from his experiments in the hills near Berlin, he would give the world something invaluable, reliable documented data about how wings actually worked. Born in 1848 in the Prussian town of Anklam, Lilienthal had watched birds since childhood with the kind of attention that goes beyond casual observation. He didn't simply notice that birds flew, he studied how they flew, measuring the curves of their wings, timing their wing beats, watching how they adjusted their feathers in the wind. His brother Gustav joined him in these studies, and together they built ornithopters, those flapping wing machines that had fascinated inventors since Leonardo's time. But unlike many dreamers, Lilienthal combined his enthusiasm with rigorous scientific method. By the 1880s, Lilienthal had concluded what others were beginning to suspect. The secret to flight wasn't in flapping, but in the shape of the wing itself. He began testing curved surfaces, what we would call airfoils, measuring the lift they produced at different angles. In 1889, he published a book titled Bird Flight as the Basis of Aviation, filled with tables, measurements, and careful observations. It wasn't romantic poetry about soaring with eagles. It was data, the kind that other inventors could actually use. But Lilienthal understood something that many theoretical scientists did not. Numbers on a page could only tell you so much. To truly understand flight, you had to experience it yourself. You had to feel the wind, sense the subtle shifts in balance, learn through your muscles and nerves what your mind alone could never grasp. And so, in 1891, at the age of 43, Otto Lilienthal became a bird. He built his first glider with willow wood frames and cotton fabric stretched tight across curved ribs. The wings arched like a gull's, spanning about 23 feet from tip to tip. There was no cockpit, no seat. Lilienthal would hang beneath the wings, suspended by his arms, his body dangling in the air. His legs would swing free, and by shifting his weight, moving his legs forward or back, left or right, he could control the craft's direction and maintain balance. It was an elegant solution that required athletic ability and quick reflexes, but it worked. His first flights were modest affairs, short hops down gentle slopes near his home. But with each flight, his confidence grew. He learned to read the wind, to feel when a gust was coming, to sense the delicate balance between speed and control. Soon he was traveling dozens of feet through the air, then hundreds. He found better locations for his experiments, including a natural hill near the village of Rhino, and later an artificial mound he constructed specifically for testing, a conical hill about 50 feet high near Lichterfelde, just outside Berlin. On pleasant weekends, crowds would gather to watch the flying man. There was something both thrilling and serene about Lilienthal's flights. Unlike the dramatic tower jumpers of earlier centuries who plummeted to the ground, Lilienthal truly glided. He would run down the hill, the glider would catch the breeze, and his feet would leave the ground. For precious seconds, sometimes as long as 12 or 15 seconds, he would sail through the air, covering distances of up to nearly 1,000 feet. Photographers captured these moments, and the images spread throughout the world. Here was proof that human flight wasn't merely theoretical. A man with wings could actually fly. What made Lilienthal truly invaluable to aviation history wasn't just that he flew, but that he documented everything. He built 18 different glider designs over 5 years, carefully recording what worked and what didn't. He noted how different wing curvatures affected lift. He experimented with tail surfaces for stability. He tested wings of different sizes and proportions. He even built a biplane glider, stacking 2 wings atop each other to increase lift without making the wingspan unwieldy. By 1896, Lilienthal had made more than 2,000 flights, accumulating more practical flying experience than anyone else in the world. His method of control, weight shifting, had limitations, but it taught him crucial lessons about aircraft stability and the importance of responding quickly to wind conditions. He began designing a system of movable wingtips that could be adjusted during flight, recognizing that hanging beneath the wings like a pendulum wasn't the ultimate solution. He dreamed of adding a small engine, of achieving not just gliding flight but true powered flight. Those photographs of Lilienthal in flight reached across oceans and into the hands of other dreamers. In America, a pair of brothers who ran a bicycle shop would study those images carefully. In France, engineers would examine his wing designs. Lilienthal had proven that the problem of flight could be solved incrementally, systematically, through patient experimentation and careful observation. But flight was still dangerous, still unpredictable. On August 9, 1896, Lilienthal was testing one of his gliders at the Rhino Hills. It was a day like many others, with good wind conditions for flying. He launched from the slope, the glider lifted properly, and for a moment all seemed well. Then something went wrong. Perhaps a sudden gust disrupted the airflow over the wings, or perhaps he misjudged his weight shift. The glider stalled, that dangerous condition where the wings lose their grip on the air. The nose pitched up. The glider hung motionless for a heartbeat, then fell. Lilienthal crashed to the ground from a height of about 50 feet. His spine was broken. He was taken to a Berlin clinic, still conscious, still thinking about his work. His last words, as they were recorded, reflected his engineer's mind, even in the face of death. Sacrifices must be made. The next day, August 10th, Otto Lilienthal died. He was 48 years old. The world of aviation mourned. The flying man was gone, but his legacy remained in every photograph, every measurement, every carefully documented experiment. Lilienthal had shown that systematic scientific study combined with hands-on experimentation could unlock the secrets of flight. He had proven that humans could glide, could control their passage through the air, could begin to master the invisible ocean above the ground. His death also taught a sobering lesson about the risks inherent in aviation, the price that pioneers sometimes paid for pushing boundaries. As the 19th century drew toward its close, Lilienthal's data and photographs circulated among the small but growing community of aviation enthusiasts. The question was no longer whether humans could fly. The question was how to improve on what Lilienthal had achieved, how to add power and better control, how to transform gliding into true sustained flight. The answer would come, but it would require different thinking about the problem of control, and it would emerge from an unexpected place across the Atlantic. The gliders had conquered the air in their own graceful way, lifting brave pilots on invisible currents of wind, teaching humanity how to bank and turn and control their passage through the sky. But there remained a fundamental limitation to these elegant machines. They could only descend. A glider pilot might stay aloft for minutes, even achieve considerable distances if conditions were favorable, but eventually the earth would reclaim every flight. The wind giveth, and the wind taketh away. What was needed, what every aviation pioneer understood with growing clarity as the 19th century drew to its close, was power. The problem seemed deceptively simple on its surface. Attach an engine to a glider, add a propeller, and the machine should fly indefinitely. Yet this simplicity dissolved the moment one examined the details. The challenge was not merely finding power, but finding the right kind of power, packaged in a form that could actually lift itself into the air. Steam engines had powered the Industrial Revolution, driving trains across continents and ships across oceans. They were reliable, well understood, and produced impressive force. Naturally, many aviation experimenters turned to steam first. The French inventor Clément Ader built steam-powered aircraft in the 1890s, creating bat-winged machines with engines that hissed and churned. His Éole may have lifted briefly from the ground in 1890, though the flight, if it happened at all, was uncontrolled and lasted only moments. The fundamental problem was mathematical and unforgiving. A steam engine required not just the engine itself, but a boiler, water, fuel to heat the water, and all the associated pipes and mechanisms. The weight added up quickly, and weight was the mortal enemy of flight. Engineers spoke of something called the power-to-weight ratio, a simple fraction that would determine whether any flying machine could exist outside the realm of dreams. The numerator was the power produced by the engine, measured in horsepower. The denominator was the total weight of the engine and its fuel system. For a flying machine to work, this ratio needed to be remarkably high. The engine had to be both powerful and light, two qualities that seemed almost contradictory with the materials and technologies available in the late 19th century. Steam engines, for all their industrial muscle, offered poor power-to-weight ratios. A typical steam plant might weigh several hundred pounds while producing perhaps 20 or 30 horsepower. These numbers simply would not permit flight, not with the wing designs and materials available at the time. Some inventors tried to optimize, creating miniature boilers and reducing every component to its essence, but the fundamental physics remained stubborn. Steam wanted to keep humans bound to earth and sea. Yet even as steam proved inadequate, another form of engine was emerging from workshops and laboratories across Europe and America. The internal combustion engine operated on a different principle entirely. Instead of burning fuel externally to heat water into steam, these engines burned fuel directly inside cylinders, using the explosive force of combustion to drive pistons. The concept had existed since the early 1800s, but practical engines only began to appear in the latter decades of the century. Nicholas Otto, working in Germany, developed a 4-stroke engine in 1876 that ran on coal gas. This Otto cycle engine, as it came to be known, was more efficient than previous designs. Soon, inventors were experimenting with liquid fuels, particularly gasoline refined from petroleum. These gasoline engines offered something remarkable. They produced substantial power from relatively compact, lightweight mechanisms. The power-to-weight ratio began to climb into ranges that made powered flight theoretically possible. Carl Benz and Gottlieb Daimler advanced automotive engines in the 1880s and 1890s, creating increasingly refined gasoline engines for the horseless carriages that were beginning to appear on city streets. These engines still weighed considerable amounts, often several hundred pounds, but they were producing 40, 50, even 60 horsepower. The ratio was improving, slowly but steadily. Aviation pioneers watched these developments with keen interest. If an engine could push a carriage along a road, could a lighter version pull an aircraft through the air? The question animated conversations in workshops and engineering societies. Some experimenters purchased automotive engines and attempted to adapt them, stripping away every unnecessary component, boring out cylinders to increase displacement, adjusting timing mechanisms to extract more power. The challenge extended beyond the engine itself. An internal combustion engine required fuel, and fuel had weight. Gasoline was relatively light compared to coal or water, and it contained impressive energy density. A small tank of gasoline could power an engine for a useful duration without adding prohibitive weight. This was another advantage over steam, where water and coal needed to be carried in substantial quantities. Cooling presented yet another puzzle. Internal combustion engines generated tremendous heat. Automotive engines used heavy water jackets and radiators to dissipate this heat, but such systems added weight that flying machines could ill afford. Some aviation experimenters considered air cooling, allowing the wind of flight itself to carry away excess heat. This seemed elegant, even poetic, but required careful design to prevent engines from overheating and seizing. By the late 1890s, the pieces were beginning to come together. Lightweight gasoline engines were becoming available, at least in principle. The power-to-weight ratios were entering the realm where sustained flight might be achievable. Yet very few engines existed that were specifically designed for aviation. Most were automotive engines, built for entirely different purposes, and even the lightened versions remained heavier than ideal. A few pioneering builders began creating purpose-built aviation engines. These were custom machines, often handcrafted, designed from the ground up to maximize power, while minimizing weight. Every component was scrutinized. Could this bracket be made smaller? Could this shaft be hollowed out? Could aluminum be used instead of steel? The quest for lightness became almost obsessive, because every pound mattered. Every pound of engine weight required additional wing area to lift, which added more structural weight, which required still more lift. The mathematics could spiral into impossibility if one was not careful. Samuel Langley, working with support from the Smithsonian Institution, commissioned a specially designed engine for his aerodrome experiments. Built by Charles Manley, this radial engine was a remarkable piece of engineering for its time, producing over 50 horsepower while weighing under 200 pounds. This was approaching the threshold, the point where the numbers suggested that powered flight might actually work. Langley's aerodrome would ultimately fail for other reasons, but the engine represented a genuine breakthrough in lightweight power. As the 20th century dawned, the power problem was becoming solved. Not completely, but sufficiently. Engines existed that could potentially lift a well-designed aircraft into sustained flight. The question was no longer whether power was theoretically possible, but who would successfully integrate all the elements, engine and propeller and wings and control, into a harmonious whole. The dream of powered flight was tantalizingly close now, waiting for the right combination of knowledge, skill, and determination to finally break free from Earth's embrace and write humanity's name across the sky. By the closing years of the 19th century, the engine problem that had plagued would-be aviators for so long finally seemed within reach of solution. The gasoline-powered internal combustion engine had evolved into something light enough, powerful enough, and reliable enough to potentially lift a flying machine into the air. Yet even as inventors celebrated this breakthrough, another puzzle waited quietly in the shadows, equally important and far more mysterious than most realized. The propeller, that deceptively simple spinning blade, held secrets that would take years to unravel. At first glance, a propeller might seem straightforward. After all, hadn't boats used propellers in water for decades? Simply attach some angled blades to a shaft, spin them rapidly with an engine, and they would push air backward, driving the aircraft forward. The principle appeared obvious enough that many early experimenters gave propeller design little serious thought, focusing instead on wings, engines, and control systems. They assumed marine propeller designs could be adapted with minor modifications, or that trial and error would quickly reveal the optimal shape. This casual approach would prove to be a costly mistake. The fundamental challenge lay in understanding what a propeller actually does. Unlike a simple paddle wheel that merely beats the air, a propeller is in essence a rotating wing. Each blade is an airfoil, shaped to generate lift just as a fixed wing does. But this lift acts perpendicular to the blade surface, pulling it forward through its circular path, which in turn pulls the aircraft forward. The complexity multiplies immediately when you consider that different parts of the same blade move at different speeds. The tip of a propeller blade traces a much larger circle than the section near the hub, meaning it travels much faster through the air during each rotation. This creates wildly different conditions along the blade's length. The problem becomes even more intricate when you recognize that a propeller blade doesn't simply move forward through undisturbed air. It moves forward while simultaneously spinning, creating a spiral path through the atmosphere. The actual angle at which air strikes the blade varies continuously along its length. Near the hub, where rotational speed is low, the blade might need a steep angle to generate useful thrust. Near the tip, where the blade spins very fast, even a slight angle might be too much, causing the blade to stall like an over-angled wing. Designing a single blade that works efficiently from root to tip requires solving complex mathematical problems that involve both the aircraft's forward speed and the propeller's rotational speed. Early aviation pioneers struggled with these invisible complications. Many propellers were simply carved from wood based on intuition or rough approximation. Some were too flat and slipped through the air without generating much thrust. Others were too aggressive in their angle and created enormous resistance that engines couldn't overcome. Still others were theoretically sound, but couldn't withstand the stresses of high-speed rotation and shattered in flight, their fragments spinning dangerously away. The efficiency of these early propellers was often dismally low, converting perhaps only 40 or 50% of the engine's power into useful thrust, wasting the rest in turbulence and drag. The scientific literature offered surprisingly little help. While theoretical work on propellers existed, much of it came from marine engineering, where water's much greater density creates fundamentally different conditions. The mathematical treatments that did exist for aerial propellers were often abstract and difficult to apply to practical design questions. An inventor might understand in principle that blade angle should vary along the length, but calculating the exact curve this twist should follow remained frustratingly elusive without sophisticated analysis. Into this confusion, the Wright brothers brought their characteristic methodical approach. After their glider experiments had taught them not to trust received wisdom, they viewed propeller design with healthy skepticism. They quickly realized that the marine propeller analogy was misleading, and that propellers were indeed rotating wings. This insight led them to apply everything they had learned about airfoils to the propeller problem. But even with this understanding, the mathematics proved challenging. The brothers spent months working through calculations, often debating their reasoning with such intensity that workers in their bicycle shop recalled hearing loud arguments from the office upstairs, only to find that after these passionate disputes, the brothers had often completely reversed their positions, each now arguing what the other had claimed before. The Wright brothers' crucial advantage came from their wind tunnel experiments. They had already built a wind tunnel to test wing shapes, gathering data that proved existing lift tables were wrong. Now they used this same tool to test propeller blade sections, measuring how different shapes performed at various angles. They carved small propeller models and tested them, refined their theories, and tested again. Through painstaking iteration, they developed propeller designs with efficiency approaching 70%, a remarkable achievement that surpassed what others in the field had managed. Their final propeller design for the 1903 Flyer featured blades 8 feet long, carved from laminated spruce and covered with fabric. The blades had a carefully calculated twist from hub to tip, with the angle changing smoothly along the length to maintain optimal efficiency. The brothers even solved another subtle problem. They mounted 2 propellers that spun in opposite directions, cancelling out the twisting force that a single propeller would have imposed on the aircraft. This counter-rotating arrangement required a clever chain and sprocket drive system, but it eliminated one more potential control problem from their design. Other experimenters would continue to struggle with propeller efficiency for years. Samuel Langley's aerodrome, which attempted flight just days before the Wright brothers' success, used propellers that were far less efficient, contributing to its failure. Even after the Wrights demonstrated successful flight, many aviators continued using poorly designed propellers simply because they didn't understand the physics involved. The propeller remained something of a dark art, with skilled craftsmen carving blades by eye and experience rather than calculation. As the years passed and aviation matured, propeller science gradually emerged from mystery into established engineering practice. Wind tunnels became more sophisticated, mathematical methods improved, and the relationship between blade shape, twist, width, and performance became better understood. But in those crucial years around the turn of the century, the propeller represented one more formidable barrier standing between dreamers and the sky, a puzzle written in invisible forces and complex geometry. The solution to this puzzle, like so many aspects of flight, required both theoretical understanding and practical experimentation, both careful calculation and intuitive feel. Those who conquered it gained a crucial advantage in the race toward powered flight, transforming their engine's power into thrust with remarkable efficiency. Those who ignored it or treated it casually found their machines earthbound, despite adequate wings and sufficient power, defeated by spinning blades that fought the air rather than mastering it. The propeller puzzle had been solved through patient experimentation and careful mathematics. The engine challenge had yielded to the genius of mechanics, who understood that power and lightness must walk hand in hand. Yet these were merely tools, instruments waiting for minds that could orchestrate them into something greater. In the final years of the 19th century, as Otto Lilienthal's tragic death cast a shadow over aviation enthusiasts worldwide, 2 brothers in Dayton, Ohio were reading the news with particular intensity. Wilbur and Orville Wright ran a modest bicycle shop on West 3rd Street. The sign above their door read, "Wright Cycle Company," and inside the smell of metal and machine oil mingled with the quiet concentration of craftsmen who took pride in precision. Bicycles in the 1890s represented cutting-edge personal transportation, requiring careful balance, lightweight construction, and an understanding of how humans interact with machines in motion. The brothers designed their own models, built them by hand, and developed an intimate knowledge of how subtle changes in geometry affected stability and control. Their path to aviation began not with grand ambition, but with curiosity. When news of Lilienthal's death reached them in 1896, Wilbur was 29 years old, Orville 25. Something about the challenge of flight captured their imagination in a way that would not release them. Here was a problem that demanded both theoretical understanding and practical skill, combining physics, engineering, and courage in equal measure. The brothers began to read everything they could find about aviation. They wrote to the Smithsonian Institution, requesting papers and publications on flight. The small collection of pamphlets and articles that arrived opened a window into decades of struggle and incremental progress. They studied Cayley's principles, read accounts of Lilienthal's gliding experiments, and absorbed the work of Octave Chanute, an American civil engineer who had conducted his own gliding experiments and served as an informal historian of aviation attempts. What distinguished the Wright brothers from many who had come before was their approach. They were not dreamers hoping to leap into the sky through intuition or luck. They were systematic thinkers who understood that flight was an engineering problem that could be broken down into manageable pieces, while others focused primarily on building more powerful engines or perfecting wing shapes. The Wrights identified something that had received less attention, but seemed to them absolutely fundamental: control. A flying machine, they reasoned, operates in 3 dimensions. Unlike a boat that moves across a flat surface, or a bicycle that travels along the ground with gravity providing constant stability, an aircraft must be controlled around 3 axes simultaneously. It must pitch up and down around its horizontal axis, it must roll left and right around its longitudinal axis, and it must yaw, turning its nose left or right around its vertical axis. Lilienthal had controlled his gliders primarily by shifting his body weight, which worked to some extent, but provided limited authority and required the pilot to hang beneath the craft in an awkward position. The Wrights observed birds with the same careful attention that Leonardo had given them 4 centuries earlier, but they looked for different things. They noticed how birds twisted the trailing edges of their wings to maintain balance in gusty air. This wing warping, as they came to call it, seemed to offer a method of control that could be built into the structure of an aircraft itself, operated by the pilot through mechanical means, rather than body shifting. In their bicycle shop, surrounded by the familiar tools of their trade, they began to think like inventors. Wilbur was the more theoretical of the pair, given to careful contemplation and detailed letter writing, but worked through problems on paper. Orville possessed brilliant mechanical intuition, able to envision how abstract concepts could be translated into working hardware. Together they formed a partnership that was greater than the sum of its parts, each complementing the other's strengths. They corresponded with Octave Chanute, who became an encouraging mentor, despite being decades their senior. Chanute had resources and connections in the small community of aviation enthusiasts, and he recognized in the Wright brothers a seriousness of purpose that impressed him. Through their letters, the Wrights learned what others had tried, what had failed, and where the remaining mysteries lay. The brothers decided they needed to build gliders and test them extensively before attempting powered flight. This was counter to some other experimenters who believed that adding an engine would solve the remaining problems. The Wrights understood that an uncontrollable glider would simply become an uncontrollable powered aircraft, with the added danger of greater speeds and more violent crashes. They needed to master the art of controlling an aircraft in unpowered flight first. But where to conduct such experiments? Dayton's flat terrain and calm winds were unsuitable for gliding. The brothers needed steady, reliable winds, soft landing surfaces, and isolation from crowds that might distract from the serious business of experimentation. Wilbur wrote to the United States Weather Bureau, requesting information about locations with consistent wind conditions. The response included data from weather stations across the country, with measurements of wind speed, direction, and consistency. One location stood out: Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, a remote fishing village on the Outer Banks, where barrier islands faced the Atlantic Ocean. The winds there blew steady and strong. The dunes provided soft sand for landings, and the isolation meant they could work without spectators or journalists, creating pressure for premature demonstrations. They also studied the existing data on air pressure and lift that previous experimenters had published. Lilienthal had compiled tables showing how much lift different wing shapes produced at various angles. These tables represented years of measurement and calculation, and they were accepted as reliable by the aviation community. The Wrights would later discover errors in these tables, but in the beginning, they took them as accurate and used them in their initial designs. Through 1899 and into 1900, the brothers prepared. They built a small biplane kite to test their wing warping control system, flying it like a large box kite, with control lines that twisted the wings. The test proved that the concept worked in principle. They could make the kite bank left or right by warping the wings, inducing a roll that could be used for turning and maintaining lateral balance. Their bicycle business provided the income to fund these experiments, and their mechanical skills gave them the ability to build whatever they needed. They were not wealthy men, but they were not impoverished either. They lived simply, saved carefully, and invested their time and resources into the challenge that had captured their imagination so completely. As the summer of 1900 approached, the brothers finalized their plans for the first full-scale glider. It would be a biplane with a wingspan of about 17 feet, controlled by wing warping for roll and a forward elevator for pitch. They would fly it first as an unmanned kite, then progress to manned gliding if the tests proved successful. Everything was designed, calculated, and built in their bicycle shop during spare hours between customer orders and regular business. The path from bicycle mechanics to aviation pioneers might seem improbable, but it made perfect sense to them. Both bicycles and aircraft required lightness, strength, balance, and control. Both demanded that theoretical knowledge be tested against practical reality, and both represented the human desire to move through the world with greater freedom and grace than nature had originally granted. As summer warmth settled over Dayton, the brothers packed their glider components and prepared for the journey to North Carolina's windswept coast, where the next chapter of humanity's quest for flight would unfold above the sand dunes. The wind along the outer banks of North Carolina moves with a constancy that shapes everything it touches. The sand dunes shift and reform in endless patterns. The beach grasses lean perpetually inland, and the maritime forests grow stunted and windswept. For Wilbur and Orville Wright, stepping off the train at Elizabeth City in September 1900, this relentless wind was precisely what they sought. Their journey south from Dayton had been carefully considered. They had written to the United States Weather Bureau, requesting data on wind conditions across the country, looking for a place that offered steady breezes, soft landing surfaces, and relative isolation for their experiments. The reply had pointed them toward several locations, but the description of Kitty Hawk, a small village on the barrier islands of North Carolina's coast, seemed most promising. Here the winds blew steadily from the north in autumn, averaging 15 to 20 miles per hour, and the tall sand dunes offered elevation without the danger of rocky surfaces. The reality of Kitty Hawk tested their resolve immediately. The village consisted of perhaps 40 weather-beaten houses, a post office, and a handful of fishing families who made their living from the sea. The isolation they had sought was absolute. There were no hotels, no restaurants, no machine shops or hardware stores. The brothers arranged to stay with the Tate family, whose home became their base while they set up camp near the beach. The conditions were far more primitive than they had imagined. Mosquitoes descended in clouds so thick the brothers could barely work some evenings. They pitched a tent among the dunes, and the wind that made their experiments possible also filled everything they owned with fine sand. Their meals were simple, their washing facilities limited to cold water, and the nearest settlement of any size required a long boat journey across the Sound. Yet in these harsh, windswept dunes, they found exactly what they needed. The first glider they assembled in 1900 was a modest machine, a biplane with a wingspan of 17 feet. They flew it primarily as a kite at first, testing its lifting capacity and stability with ropes from the ground. When they did attempt short glides with a pilot aboard, lying prone on the lower wing, the flights lasted only seconds and covered mere feet. But those seconds taught them volumes about balance, control, and the behavior of wings in moving air. The brothers returned to Dayton for the winter, their minds full of observations and their notebooks dense with measurements. The following year they came back to the Outer Banks with a larger glider, this one with a wingspan of 22 feet. They made camp again among the dunes, this time setting up near Kill Devil Hills, about 4 miles south of Kitty Hawk Village, where the sand hills rose higher and steeper. The 1901 experiments proved both encouraging and frustrating. The glider generated lift, carrying them down the slopes of the dunes in flights that sometimes covered several hundred feet, but it also behaved unpredictably. Sometimes the glider would suddenly rise up, lose speed, and drop to the sand. Other times it would dive forward despite their efforts to control it. The wing warping system they had designed to control rolling motion sometimes seemed to produce the opposite effect from what they intended. They flew hundreds of glides that summer, making careful notes after each attempt. Wilbur, the more natural pilot of the two, would lie in the center of the lower wing, working the elevator control with his left hand, while a hip cradle allowed him to shift his body weight and warp the wings for lateral control. Orville would observe, record, and then take his own turns in the glider. They crashed frequently, the soft sand cushioning impacts that might have injured them on harder ground. By the time they returned to Dayton in August 1901, they were discouraged. The glider had not performed as their calculations predicted. Wilbur even remarked to Orville that men might not fly for 50 years. But discouragement in the Wright brothers did not lead to abandonment. Instead, it led to more systematic investigation. Back in their bicycle shop that winter, they built a wind tunnel, a simple wooden box, 6 feet long with a glass window on top and a fan at one end. In this device, they tested dozens of miniature wing shapes, measuring lift and drag with delicate balances they constructed themselves. The data they gathered contradicted some of the published aeronautical tables they had been relying on. The coefficients and formulas that Lilienthal and others had used were not quite accurate. Armed with their own empirical data, the brothers designed a new glider for 1902. When they returned to Kill Devil Hills that September, their camp was more established. They built a wooden shed to house the glider and provide shelter from the worst weather. The new machine had a wingspan of 32 feet and incorporated all they had learned from their wind tunnel experiments. The wing shape was different, the curve more precisely calculated, and they had added a fixed vertical tail to help with stability. The 1902 glider transformed their understanding of flight. Through hundreds of glides that autumn, they refined their control system. They discovered that the fixed tail sometimes caused problems when they warped the wings, creating a situation where the glider would start to spin sideways. Orville suggested making the tail movable, connecting it to the wing warping controls so it would automatically coordinate with the rolling motion. This innovation proved crucial, giving them control in all 3 axes of rotation: pitch, roll, and yaw. Day after day, they carried the glider up the slopes of Kill Devil Hills, launched into the steady wind, and glided down to the sand below. They learned to feel the air, to sense the subtle pressure changes that warned of a gust or a lull. They discovered how to make gentle turns, how to maintain balance in crosswinds, how to land smoothly instead of plowing into the sand. By the end of October, they were making glides of more than 600 feet, staying aloft for more than half a minute at a time. The local life-saving station crew members would sometimes come to watch. These men, whose job was to rescue shipwreck victims from the dangerous shoals offshore. They saw these 2 quiet brothers from Ohio, methodical and focused, repeatedly climbing the dunes and flying their increasingly confident glides. News of the experiment spread slowly through the isolated communities of the Outer Banks, carried by the few visitors and the occasional journalist who made the difficult journey to witness these strange activities. As winter approached and the winds grew colder, the Wright brothers packed their glider into their shed and secured it against the weather. They had made nearly 1,000 glides in 3 seasons. They had solved the problem of control, the fundamental challenge that had defeated so many before them. Their glider could be steered and balanced in the air with reasonable predictability. They could launch, fly, turn and land with growing skill. The dunes of Kitty Hawk had become their laboratory, the wind their research partner, and the soft sand their patient teacher. Now, as they prepared to return north once more, their thoughts turned to the one element still missing from their conquest of the air. They could glide, but gliding was falling with style, dependent on slopes and winds. True flight, the kind that Leonardo had dreamed of and birds demonstrated every day, required power. It required an engine light enough to carry, and strong enough to pull an aircraft through the sky under its own thrust. That challenge awaited them in Dayton, in their workshop, through the winter ahead. The morning of December 17, 1903, dawned cold and clear over the isolated dunes of Kill Devil Hills. A bitter wind swept in from the Atlantic, cutting across the sand with the kind of relentless force that would make most people seek shelter. But for Wilbur and Orville Wright, this wind was exactly what they needed. They had been waiting for days, watching the weather, preparing their machine, and now the conditions were finally right. The temperature hovered just above freezing as the brothers emerged from their wooden shed. Puddles from recent rain had frozen solid overnight, and the wind measured close to 27 miles per hour, gusting even stronger. It was Thursday, and the brothers had already sent word to the nearby life-saving station that they would attempt their powered flight that day. They would need witnesses, and they would need help moving their aircraft to the launching rail. The Wright Flyer sat waiting, a construction of spruce wood and muslin fabric that weighed just over 600 pounds. Its two propellers, carved from laminated spruce and mounted behind the wings, represented months of careful calculation and wind tunnel testing. The engine, built by their mechanic Charlie Taylor back in Dayton, was a simple four-cylinder design that produced about 12 horsepower. It wasn't much, but their mathematics suggested it would be enough. By mid-morning, 5 men had arrived from the life-saving station. John Daniels, Willie Doe, Adam Etheridge, and 2 others came trudging across the sand to witness what many still considered an unlikely experiment. A local businessman named W.C.A. Brinkley also made his way to the dunes, though the isolation of the location meant there would be no crowds, no reporters, no fanfare, just a handful of men standing in the cold wind, watching 2 bicycle mechanics from Ohio attempt something that had eluded humanity since the beginning of recorded history. The brothers laid out a 60-foot launching rail, a simple track made of wooden sections with a metal cap. The flyer would rest on a small wheeled dolly, but would run along this rail, helping the aircraft build speed before lifting into the air. They positioned the rail on level ground, pointing it straight into the wind. The strong headwind would help generate lift even at slower ground speeds, a crucial advantage for their underpowered machine. The December wind had barely settled over the dunes of Kitty Hawk when humanity faced a new question. The Wright brothers had proven that a machine could fly, that humans could guide themselves through the air with purpose and control, but beneath that triumph lay a deeper mystery, one that scientists and engineers would spend decades unraveling completely. How exactly does a wing create the invisible force that holds thousands of pounds aloft? If you had asked the Wright brothers themselves on that cold December day, they might have given you a practical answer drawn from their careful experiments. They knew that curved surfaces moving through air created lift. They had measured it, tested it, refined it, but the complete physics of why wings work the way they do would require contributions from many minds, spanning generations of scientific inquiry. Let us drift now into the gentle realm of air and motion, where invisible forces create the miracle of flight. Picture, if you will, a wing moving through the atmosphere. It appears solid and simple, yet it orchestrates a complex dance of air molecules, pressure differences, and flowing streams that somehow result in an upward push strong enough to overcome gravity itself. The most common explanation you may have encountered involves a principle discovered by Daniel Bernoulli in the 18th century. Long before anyone had built a practical flying machine, Bernoulli, studying the behavior of fluids flowing through pipes, noticed something remarkable. When a fluid moves faster, its pressure decreases. When it moves slower, its pressure increases. This inverse relationship between speed and pressure would eventually help explain the lifting force of wings. A typical airplane wing, viewed from the side, presents an elegant asymmetry. The top surface curves more dramatically than the bottom, creating what engineers call an airfoil shape. As the wing slices through the air, the flow divides around it. The air traveling over the curved upper surface must cover a longer distance than the air passing beneath. To rejoin at the trailing edge of the wing at the same time, the air above must travel faster than the air below. According to Bernoulli's principle, that faster moving air above the wing creates a region of lower pressure. Meanwhile, the slower moving air beneath creates higher pressure. This pressure difference generates an upward force. The wing caught between these two pressure zones experiences lift. Push the wing forward fast enough, make it large enough, and this pressure difference can lift enormous weights into the sky. This explanation has graced countless textbooks and satisfied many curious minds. Yet the story of lift contains additional layers, other ways of understanding the same phenomenon that reveal different aspects of the truth. Physics, in its kindness, often offers multiple perspectives on the same reality. Sir Isaac Newton's laws of motion provide another lens through which to view lift. Newton's third law tells us that for every action, there exists an equal and opposite reaction. When a wing moves through air, it doesn't simply part the flow and let it close behind unchanged. The wing deflects air downward, redirecting its path. As the wing pushes air down, the air pushes the wing up. This downward deflection of air, called downwash, creates an upward reaction force on the wing. The angle at which the wing meets the oncoming air, known as the angle of attack, proves crucial here. Even a flat board, if angled slightly upward into the wind, will deflect air downward and experience lift. The curved shape of most wings enhances this effect, but the fundamental principle of deflection remains. The wing changes the momentum of passing air, and that change in momentum requires a force, which Newton's laws tell us must have an equal and opposite partner. These two explanations, Bernoulli's pressure differences and Newton's deflection forces, are not competing theories. They describe the same physical reality from different viewpoints, like two people describing the same sculpture from opposite sides of a room. The air flowing faster over the top of the wing is the same air being deflected downward. The pressure difference and the momentum change are two faces of one phenomenon. There exists yet another way to understand lift, one that involves the concept of circulation. Imagine the air flowing around a wing creates a kind of rotational pattern, with the flow curving over the top and under the bottom. This circulation, combined with the forward motion of the wing, creates lift through what mathematicians call the Kutta-Joukowski theorem. While this might sound abstract, it provides engineers with precise tools to calculate the forces on wings of different shapes. The beauty of these multiple perspectives is that they all prove useful for different purposes. When designing a wing, engineers might use Bernoulli's principle to think about pressure distributions. When considering how a wing performs at different angles, Newton's laws of deflection provide insight. When calculating exact forces mathematically, circulation theory offers powerful equations. Each viewpoint illuminates a different aspect of the gentle miracle occurring around every flying wing. What makes a wing shape effective involves many subtle factors. The curve of the upper surface, called camber, must be carefully designed. Too much curve and the air may separate from the surface, destroying the smooth flow pattern and causing a sudden loss of lift called a stall. Too little curve and the wing generates less lift than it might. The thickness of the wing, the sharpness of its leading edge, the angle of its trailing edge, all these details matter. The Wright brothers, working in their bicycle shop with homemade wind tunnel equipment, discovered many of these principles through patient experimentation. They tested hundreds of wing shapes, measuring the forces on each, building up a practical knowledge of what worked, even as the complete theory remained under development. Their approach combined empirical testing with theoretical understanding, a methodology that would characterize aviation engineering for generations to come. As you settle deeper into rest, consider how remarkable it is that air, seemingly so insubstantial, can support great weights through nothing more than motion and shape. The same invisible medium through which you move your hand without effort becomes, when properly understood and channeled, a road to the sky. Every commercial flight, every soaring bird, every falling leaf catching the breeze, all participate in these same principles of pressure, deflection, and flow. The physics of lift reminds us that the universe often hides its most powerful forces in plain sight, operating through principles that, once understood, seem almost obvious. Yet reaching that understanding required centuries of observation, experimentation, and thought. The wings that now carry millions of passengers daily through the air embody countless hours of human curiosity and persistence, translating invisible forces into practical magic. The morning after that historic December day at Kill Devil Hills, the world did not wake to fanfare and celebration. The telegram the Wright brothers sent to their father in Dayton was brief and matter-of-fact, announcing success with 4 flights and promising to be home for Christmas. When the bishop shared the news with local newspapers, the initial reports were scattered and confused. Some papers got the details wrong, others ignored the story entirely. The age of flight had begun, but most of humanity had yet to notice. This quiet reception was not entirely surprising. By 1903, the public had grown weary of flight claims. Countless inventors had announced breakthroughs that never materialized. Newspapers had been fooled before by exaggerated reports and doctored photographs. The Wright brothers' achievement, though genuine, arrived into a climate of skepticism that years of false promises had created. The brothers themselves seemed almost to invite this doubt through their approach to publicity. Unlike many inventors of their era who sought immediate fame and financial backing, Wilbur and Orville returned to Dayton and continued their work in relative secrecy. They understood that their December flights, while historic, represented only the beginning. The longest had lasted just 59 seconds and covered barely more than 800 feet. For flight to be truly practical, they needed to develop better control, longer endurance, and the ability to turn reliably in the air. Through 1904 and 1905, the brothers conducted their experiments at Huffman Prairie, a cow pasture about 8 miles outside Dayton. This flat, unremarkable field became the site of aviation's next great leaps forward. Here, away from curious crowds and interfering reporters, they refined their control systems and learned to keep their aircraft aloft for minutes rather than seconds. The work was methodical, sometimes frustrating, and largely invisible to the watching world. The challenges they faced at Huffman Prairie differed from those at Kitty Hawk. The steady coastal winds that had aided their gliding experiments were absent in the Ohio flatlands. The brothers had to develop a catapult launching system, using a falling weight and derrick to help their aircraft achieve takeoff speed. They strengthened their engine, improved their propellers, and most importantly, they practiced the delicate art of turning flight after flight until their movements became instinctive. By the end of 1905, the transformation was remarkable. Wilbur's flight on October 5th of that year lasted 39 minutes and covered more than 24 miles in a series of circles over the prairie. The Wright Flyer 3rd, their latest design, could bank smoothly, turn in tight circles, execute figure eights, and land predictably at a chosen spot. This was no longer a machine that briefly hopped through the air. This was an aircraft that could truly fly. Yet even these extraordinary achievements failed to capture widespread attention. The brothers invited few witnesses to their prairie flights, concerned about protecting their innovations before securing patents. This secrecy, while understandable, fed the skepticism. Scientific journals and aviation enthusiasts in Europe began to question whether the Wrights had truly flown at all. Perhaps, some suggested, their claims were exaggerated. Perhaps they had merely glided or made short hops, rather than achieving true controlled flight. The Wrights found themselves in a peculiar position. They possessed technology that would revolutionize transportation, but they struggled to convince the world of what they had accomplished. They approached the United States War Department in 1905, offering to build aircraft for military use, but their proposal was declined. Government officials had grown tired of impractical flying machine schemes and dismissed the brothers' letter without serious consideration. In Europe, meanwhile, other experimenters were making their own attempts at powered flight. Alberto Santos Dumont, a Brazilian living in Paris, achieved a public flight of about 200 feet in October 1906, winning a prize and capturing headlines across the continent. His flight, though far shorter and less controlled than what the Wrights had achieved years earlier, had the advantage of being performed before crowds and cameras. For many Europeans, Santos Dumont became the first person to fly. This situation troubled the Wright brothers. Though they maintained their patient, businesslike approach, they knew what they had accomplished. They possessed detailed flight logs, photographs, and the testimony of those who had witnessed their prairie flights. More importantly, they had working aircraft that could demonstrate capabilities far beyond anything others had achieved. The challenge was finding the right moment and forum to prove their claims decisively. The turning point came in 1908. After years of negotiations, the brothers finally secured contracts with both the United States Army and a French syndicate to demonstrate their aircraft. Now the time for secrecy had passed. The time for proof had arrived. Wilbur traveled to France in the summer of 1908, bringing a Wright flyer to a racecourse near Le Mans. The French aviation community waited with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. Many expected to see crude attempts that might briefly leave the ground. What they witnessed instead left them astonished. On August 8th, Wilbur made his first public flight in France, and the elegance of his control spoke louder than any words could have. He circled the field smoothly, banking into turns with precision that no European aviator had yet achieved. He climbed and descended at will. He made figure eights in the sky. Those watching from the ground understood immediately that they were seeing something entirely beyond their own experiments. The effect on European aviation was electric. René Gasnier, a French pilot who witnessed Wilbur's demonstration, later recalled feeling both amazed and humbled. The Wright brothers, working quietly in Ohio, had solved problems that European experimenters were only beginning to understand. Within days, the skepticism that had shadowed the Wrights for years evaporated like morning mist beneath the sun. Orville, meanwhile, conducted demonstrations at Fort Myer in Virginia for the United States Army. His flights were equally impressive, though tragedy marked the trials when a passenger, Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge, was killed in a crash caused by a propeller failure. This accident, the first fatality in powered aviation, sobered the celebrations, but did not diminish the recognition that controlled flight had been achieved. By the end of 1908, the debate was over. The Wright brothers had proven beyond any doubt that they had solved the problem of flight. Their patient years of development, their systematic approach, and their focus on control had created aircraft that could perform maneuvers others could only dream about. The age of skepticism had given way to the age of acceptance, and the sky, once the realm of birds and dreams, now belonged to humanity as well. The world had witnessed the Wright brothers' demonstrations, and the doubters had finally fallen silent. Now, in the years between 1908 and the summer of 1914, aviation would spread across continents like wildfire, transforming from a curious novelty into a technology that captured the imagination and ambition of nations. In France, the transformation was particularly dramatic. French aviators, stung by the realization that two American bicycle mechanics had solved the problem of flight first, threw themselves into aviation with remarkable energy. Glenn Curtiss arrived from America, bringing new ideas about aircraft design. Louis Blériot worked tirelessly in his workshop, refining monoplane designs that differed significantly from the Wright brothers' approach. Where the Wrights had favored wing warping and a biplane configuration, Blériot explored single-wing aircraft with more conventional control surfaces. The summer of 1909 brought an event that would electrify the world. The London Daily Mail had offered a prize of £1,000 to the first person to fly across the English Channel. The 22 miles of open water between Calais and Dover represented more than just distance. For centuries, that channel had been England's natural moat, its protection against invasion, its geographical identity. To fly across it would prove that aviation had truly arrived as a practical technology. On the morning of July 25th, Louis Blériot climbed into his Blériot XI monoplane near Calais. His aircraft was a fragile thing of wood and fabric, powered by a small three-cylinder engine that produced just 25 horsepower. He had burned his foot badly in a recent accident and could barely walk, but he was determined to make the attempt. As dawn broke across the French coast, he lifted into the air and pointed his aircraft toward England. For 37 minutes, Blériot flew across open water with no landmarks to guide him and no place to land if his engine failed. The wind pushed him off course. He could see neither France behind him nor England ahead through the early morning haze. Then, through the mist, the white cliffs of Dover emerged. He spotted a French journalist waving a tricolour flag near Dover Castle, descended toward the meadow, and landed with a crash that damaged his landing gear, but left him unharmed. The crossing made headlines around the world. Overnight, the implications became clear to everyone. If the channel could be crossed by air, then no natural barrier was truly impassable anymore. Islands were no longer isolated by water. Mountains could be flown over rather than climbed. The world had suddenly become smaller, more connected, and the ancient relationship between geography and security had fundamentally changed. Aviation meetings and air races began to spring up across Europe and America. These were part competition, part carnival, and part proving ground for new designs. The Reims Aviation Meet in August 1909 attracted enormous crowds who watched as pilots competed for speed, altitude, and distance records. The Wright brothers sent a team to compete. Glenn Curtiss demonstrated his latest designs. French, British, and German pilots pushed their machines to the limits. These gatherings were beautiful and dangerous affairs. The aircraft were works of art in their way, with graceful wings and delicate structures that caught the light as they turned through the sky. But they were also temperamental and fragile. Engines failed regularly. Wings collapsed under stress. Several pilots died during these early meets, falling from the sky as crowds watched in horror. Yet the pilots kept flying, driven by a combination of competitive spirit, genuine scientific curiosity, and the sheer joy of flight that seemed to override the obvious risks. By 1910, pilots were attempting longer cross-country flights. In America, pilots began flying between cities, following railroad lines and roads below. The first flights from London to Manchester, from Paris to Rome, from one end of countries to the other, each journey pushed the boundaries of what was possible. These flights were grueling ordeals lasting many hours, with pilots exposed to wind and cold in open cockpits, navigating by landmarks, and hoping their engines would keep running. Aircraft design evolved rapidly during these years. The basic configuration that we would recognize today began to emerge. Inventors experimented with different arrangements of wings, tails, and control surfaces. Some designs succeeded magnificently. Others proved disastrous. The accumulated wisdom from thousands of flights gradually revealed which approaches worked and which didn't. Ailerons began to replace wing warping for roll control. Enclosed fuselages started to appear. Engines grew more powerful and more reliable. Women joined the ranks of pilots during these pioneering years. Raymond de la Roche of France became the first woman to earn a pilot's license in 1910. Harriet Quimby earned her license in America in 1911 and went on to fly across the English Channel in 1912. Jessica Rechet, Hélène Dutré, and others broke barriers and demonstrated that the sky was not exclusively a male domain. Their achievements were celebrated widely, though they often had to overcome significant skepticism and social resistance. The technology attracted serious financial investment as people began to see commercial possibilities. Aircraft manufacturers emerged as real businesses rather than workshops run by enthusiastic tinkerers. Designers could now build on years of accumulated knowledge rather than starting from scratch. The progress that had taken the Wright brothers years of painstaking experimentation could now be achieved in months by those who studied what had already been learned. By 1914, aviation had advanced remarkably from those first tentative hops at Kitty Hawk just over a decade earlier. Pilots routinely flew for hours at a time. Aircraft could carry passengers in addition to the pilot. Speeds had increased from the Wright Flyer's 30 miles per hour to more than 100 miles per hour for the fastest racing aircraft. Altitude records had climbed from a few hundred feet to over 20,000 feet. The dream that had seemed impossible had become ordinary in barely more than 10 years. The sky, once the exclusive realm of birds and clouds and divine mystery, had become a place where humans could travel with increasing confidence. As the summer of 1914 approached, thousands of pilots were flying across Europe and America, and aircraft were being manufactured in factories rather than small workshops. No one could have known that within months, this new technology would be tested in ways the pioneers had never imagined, that the machines created for sport and wonder would soon serve purposes far removed from the pure joy of flight that had motivated those early aviators. But for now, in these last peaceful months, aviation spread its wings across the world, and the future seemed to stretch ahead as bright and unlimited as the open sky itself. The world looked different from above. In those early years following the Wright brothers' public demonstrations, as more aircraft took to the skies across Europe and America, humanity gained a perspective it had never possessed in all its long history. The patchwork of farm fields that had seemed so vast from the ground revealed itself as an orderly geometry of human effort. Rivers that wandered mysteriously through valleys suddenly showed their complete courses from mountain source to distant sea. Cities that had grown organically over centuries, their twisted medieval streets making sense only to those who walked them daily, now displayed patterns visible only to the birds and to these new mechanical visitors to the upper air. Photographers quickly recognized the revolutionary potential of aerial perspective. Before aviation, the highest vantage points for cameras had been church towers, tall buildings, and occasionally tethered balloons that swayed unpredictably in the wind. Now, aircraft could carry cameras to specific locations, circle at chosen altitudes, and capture images that revealed the Earth's features with startling clarity. Military surveyors immediately grasped the implications. What had required weeks of careful ground measurement could now be photographed in hours. Coastlines, harbors, fortifications, and troop movements became visible in ways that rendered old methods of reconnaissance obsolete almost overnight. The mapmakers, who had practiced their ancient craft through centuries of patient triangulation and careful surveying, found themselves presented with an entirely new tool. Maps had always been approximations, limited by the difficulty of seeing the whole while standing in the midst of the part. Aerial photography changed this fundamental constraint. Lakes that had been measured from boats now showed their true shapes in a single image. Mountain ranges that required dangerous expeditions revealed their contours to cameras mounted on flying machines. The accuracy of maps improved dramatically, and with that improvement came new understanding of the world's true geography. Commerce sensed opportunity in the air. If letters and packages had once traveled by horse, then by railroad, then by automobile over improving roads, why not by air? The distances that had dictated the pace of business communication for all of human history suddenly seemed less fixed, less final. A message that took 3 days by train might reach its destination in hours by aircraft. The psychological impact of this acceleration proved as significant as the practical benefits. Business people began to imagine transactions conducted at speeds their grandparents would have considered impossible. Newspapers followed commercial interests skyward. The drama of aviation itself provided endless stories for readers fascinated by this new technology. But beyond simply reporting on flying, publishers recognized that aircraft could deliver their papers to distant cities faster than any ground transport. In an era when the freshness of news determined its value, when competing papers fought to be first with important stories, the airplane became a tool of the trade. Morning editions could reach outlying towns while the news still felt immediate, while readers still craved the details. The mail services of various nations watched these developments with professional interest. Since ancient times, the speed of postal communication had defined the pace of diplomacy, commerce, and personal connection across distances. Persian mounted couriers, Roman road systems, Pony Express riders across American plains, each represented the fastest possible movement of messages in their era. Now aviation promised another leap forward. Experimental airmail routes began appearing, testing whether regular flight schedules could be maintained, whether weather would prove too great an obstacle, whether the economics of aerial postal service made practical sense. Travel itself stood on the threshold of transformation. In 1903, when the Wright flyer first lifted from the sand at Kitty Hawk, passenger aviation existed only in imagination. By 1914, the first scheduled passenger airline service had begun operation, carrying travelers across Tampa Bay in Florida. The flight lasted just 23 minutes and crossed a body of water that took hours to circumnavigate by land. For the price of a ticket, passengers experienced something that would have seemed pure fantasy merely a decade earlier. Routine transportation through the air, departing and arriving on schedule, no more remarkable to the operators than a ferry crossing. the sensation of distance itself began shifting in human consciousness. Places that had been far away remained geographically distant, but the meaning of that distance changed. A journey that once required careful planning, substantial time commitment, and considerable expense gradually became more accessible. The wealthy who could afford early air travel began thinking of distant cities, not as remote destinations requiring expedition-level preparation, but as places one might visit for business and return home within days. This psychological shift, this gradual compression of perceived distance, represented perhaps the most profound early impact of aviation on human society. Architecture responded to the new perspective from above. Before flight, the tops of buildings had been seen only by the people who constructed them and the occasional maintenance worker. Now, rooftops became visible elements of design. Some architects began considering how their structures would appear from the air, adding visual interest to surfaces that had previously needed only to shed rain. The very idea that a building might be designed partly for the view from above represented a fundamental change in how humans thought about constructed space. Farmers in their fields would stop their work when they heard the distant sound of an engine overhead, shading their eyes to watch the aircraft pass. Children would run into open spaces, pointing skyward, marveling that such a thing could be. The novelty of flight had not yet worn away into mere routine. Each passing aircraft remained a small miracle, a defiance of what had seemed possible to every generation that came before. Weather forecasters discovered that aircraft could carry instruments to altitudes where balloon measurements were difficult and dangerous. Understanding atmospheric conditions at various heights became practical rather than theoretical. The three-dimensional nature of weather systems, only partially understood from ground observations, revealed itself to instruments carried aloft. Meteorology gained a new dimension, quite literally, and with it came improved ability to predict the storms and clear skies that affected everyone on the ground below. The speed of human existence had begun its acceleration. Not everyone welcomed the change. Some observers worried that the contemplative pace of earlier eras, the necessary patience required when distance meant something absolute, would be lost to this new velocity. But the transformation had achieved momentum that philosophy could not arrest. Flight had arrived, and with it came all the cascading changes that happen when a barrier that has existed since the beginning of human history suddenly vanishes. The dream of wings, once achieved, transformed from aspiration into tool, and humanity would never see the world or its possibilities quite the same way again. The years following those first tentative flights at Kitty Hawk witnessed something remarkable, something that happened faster than perhaps any technological transformation before it. What had been the province of dreamers and mythmakers became, in the span of a single human lifetime, an ordinary part of everyday life. The impossible had become merely difficult, and the difficult had become routine. By the early 1920s, barely 2 decades after the Wright flyer lifted off the sand at Kill Devil Hills, airmail routes crisscrossed continents. Pilots navigated by landmarks and railroad tracks, carrying letters and packages that would have taken weeks by train. The sky had become a highway, and those who had watched the Wrights' first flights were now watching squadrons of aircraft pass overhead with barely a glance upward. The transformation was both gradual and sudden, like watching dawn break across a landscape. Each innovation built upon the last. The fragile wood and fabric craft of 1903 gave way to more robust designs. Metal began to replace wood. Engines grew more powerful and more reliable. Landing gear improved. Instruments appeared in cockpits to help pilots navigate through clouds and darkness. What had required perfect weather and ideal conditions in those early days could now be accomplished in rain, at night, over mountains. Consider the distance traveled, not in miles, but in human imagination. Leonardo da Vinci, sketching his ornithopter by candlelight in Renaissance Italy, could never have envisioned the reality that emerged. His vision was of a man strapped to mechanical wings, flapping through the air like an oversized bird. He understood observation and mechanics, but the actual solution to flight would come from a different direction entirely, from fixed wings and engines, from understanding forces and control surfaces, Those tower jumpers of the 16th and 17th centuries, brave and foolish in equal measure, had imagined flight as a matter of courage and the right equipment. Strap on wings, jump from a height, and somehow the air would cooperate. They had no framework for understanding why birds fly, no conception of lift and drag, no mathematical language to describe the invisible forces at work. Their failures, however tragic, were inevitable. The knowledge simply did not yet exist. The balloon flights of the late 18th century had seemed like the answer, and in a way they were, but only partially. The Montgolfiers and their contemporaries had discovered how to go up, how to float in the ocean of air, but they could not steer, could not truly control their destiny once aloft. They were at the mercy of wind and weather, drifting passengers rather than pilots. It was flight, yes, but not the flight humans had dreamed of, not the soaring mastery of birds. The glider pioneers of the 19th century had understood something crucial that those before them had missed. They recognized that control mattered more than power, that learning to guide an unpowered craft through the air was the essential first step. Otto Lilienthal, making his thousands of glides from his artificial hill outside Berlin, had quite literally learned to fly his own body, to feel the air and respond to it. His death was a tragedy, but his contribution was immeasurable. He proved that human flight was possible and documented exactly how it worked. And then came the Wright brothers, methodical and patient, who brought all the pieces together. They understood that the problem was not one problem but many, and they solved each in turn. Control systems, wing shapes, propeller efficiency, engine design. They built wind tunnels and tested hundreds of wing configurations. They taught themselves to fly in gliders before attempting powered flight. They succeeded not because they were lucky or reckless, but because they were thorough. Their success at Kitty Hawk was not an ending, but a beginning. In the years that followed, they refined and improved their design. The Flyer 2 and Flyer 3 could stay aloft for longer periods, could turn and circle, could land reliably. By 1905, they had an aircraft that was genuinely practical, that could stay in the air for over half an hour and cover more than 20 miles in a single flight. But the achievement went beyond the mechanical. What the Wright brothers and those who followed them had done was to expand the boundaries of human possibility. For all of recorded history, humanity had been bound to the surface of the earth. We could climb mountains, sail across oceans, build towers reaching toward the clouds, but we could not leave the ground under our own power and return safely. Birds had that freedom. Insects had it, but not us. The conquest of the air changed something fundamental in human consciousness. The view from above, once available only in imagination, became accessible. Photographs taken from aircraft revealed landscapes in entirely new ways. Cities became geometric patterns. Rivers showed their full winding courses. The curvature of horizons became visible. To see the Earth from above is to see it differently, to understand geography and space in ways that no map quite captures, and beyond the practical applications, beyond the mail delivery and the military reconnaissance and the commercial possibilities, there was something else. Flight represented the achievement of an ancient dream. It proved that the laws of nature, properly understood, could be worked with rather than against. The air that had seemed like emptiness was actually a medium that could support and carry, if approached with the right knowledge and the right tools. The speed of progress after 1903 was breathtaking. By 1909, Louis Blériot had flown across the English Channel, connecting England to the continent by air for the first time. By 1911, Galbraith Rogers had crossed the entire United States by air, a journey that took many stops and repairs but proved it could be done. By 1914, scheduled passenger flights were operating in Florida. The world was shrinking. Distances that had once been measured in weeks of travel were now measured in hours. Each achievement opened the door to new dreams. If humans could fly in the atmosphere, what about higher, above the air itself? The same generation that witnessed the Wright brothers' first flights would live to see rockets and the beginnings of space exploration. The sky, it turned out, was not a limit at all, but a passage. As you drift toward sleep tonight, consider the journey we have traveled together through these chapters, from myths and legends to Leonardo's careful sketches, from disastrous tower jumps to successful balloon flights, from gliders soaring down sand dunes to powered aircraft circling above fields, from skepticism to acceptance. The story of flight is the story of human persistence, of observation and learning, of building on the work of those who came before. The dream of wings, carried in human hearts for thousands of years, finally came true, not through magic or divine intervention, but through patience, science, and determination. And that achievement, that transformation of the impossible into the routine, reminds us that other dreams, other seemingly impossible goals, might also yield to human ingenuity and effort. Sleep well, knowing that the sky above, once an impenetrable barrier, is now a place where humans move as freely as we once dreamed we might. As we bring to a close our journey through humanity's dream of flight, from Leonardo's visionary sketches to the Wright brothers' historic triumph at Kitty Hawk, we hope these stories of determination and discovery have gently carried you toward rest. Thank you for joining us on this peaceful exploration through the skies of history and imagination. If these calm adventures have brought you comfort, we'd love to have you with us again. Please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below to help other smart sleepers find their way here. And now, as the night deepens and your mind settles like a bird coming home to roost, we wish you the sweetest of dreams. Good night, fellow dreamer, and may your sleep be restful and your dreams take flight on gentle wings.